Aelin then asks if Maeve is a Valg, and Brannon laughs it off to say, as cold as one, but no. And I was like, giant red flag. Absolutely. Maeve is a Valg.
You're like that guy on TikTok, the red flag guy. I love him.
Yes. That is me. I'm him. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booktown Fantasy Podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. We have a huge, earth-shattering reveal about Manon and some other jump scares from Brannon and Erawan in this set of chapters, so consider us shooketh. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 13 through 20 specifically, but there will definitely be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes The Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. Our next Empire of Storms episode will cover chapters 21 through 29. Second, if you need to fill the time between our Empire of Storms episodes, then definitely check out our Onyx Storm coverage. Or if you want to revisit the past with a nostalgic book, then we have launched our very first Paging the Past book review covering the Hunger Games. Our Paging the Past episodes will be monthly book reviews to revisit all of our favorite series from the past, like Harry Potter, Twilight, and more. Our next Paging the Past episode will cover Catching Fire, which is the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy, so keep an eye out for that as well.
Also, just a heads up, unfortunately, I am still sick, so if my voice still sounds funny, I apologize. And if this is your first or second time listening, I promise I will not continue to sound nasally or nasty. I actually wrote nasally, but then I read it as nasty, but both apply. Both apply. By next week, I swear I'll be better.
One thing we can count on, though, is dedication from Addison.
Hell yeah, exactly. I'm just like, if Manon Blackbeak can survive that, I can do this, okay?
All right, so that is all for housekeeping, and let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we'll dive into an analysis and our theories for each chapter, and finally, we will share our favorite moments. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
With grit and determination. Chapter 13. It had been a long while since Dorian had seen so many stars. Dorian and Rowan sailed across the sea toward the Dead Islands at a rapid pace with the aid of Rowan's magic. As they sailed through the night, Rowan and Dorian had a heart-to-heart about the dangers of magic, their lost loves, and the future of the continent. Rowan agreed to help teach Dorian about his magic as much as he could, and reassured Dorian that he too would find his way in the world. Chapter 14. It was time for Operation Temple Takeback. Before the official part of the operation could begin, Aelin and Aelin arranged for passage on a ship to the Dead Islands that would depart the next morning. They also received news from the captain that 50 warships and an army of Fey warriors were camped on the shores of Wendelin. It could only be Maeve, but whether she was preparing to help or hurt, no one knew. While Aelin waited to give the signal to begin the battle back for the temple, a troubled Lysandra tells Aedion that she is worried about Aelin and her fate, and that she wonders if the gods have decided that destroying Erawan is worth the loss of this continent and possibly the world. The conversation turns lighthearted and flirtatious, but ultimately left Aedion with a pit of longing in his chest for someone to love. Lysandra. And I didn't have to fake those coughs. Those are real coughs, guys. Aelin gave the signal and the attack began. It was over in 20 minutes. They reclaimed the temple and Aelin cleansed it with fire, burning away decades of dirt and debris. What remained was beautiful and sacred. Aelin made her way to the sacred rock, a monument to Brannon. She mounted the small stairs to gaze upon the rock, and then she stepped onto it. Chapter 15. Aelin stared at the sea and waited until Brannon appeared. Aelin sarcastically joked with Brannon that he was only going to be here long enough to cram as many cryptic warnings as possible before disappearing. But Aelin had her own goddamned questions, and so instead of waiting, she asked them. She asked Brannon if May could be killed, and surprise, surprise, he didn't know. He then told her that she would need to find the lock hidden in the stone marshes. The lock was the only way to bind the keys back into the broken word gate and seal it permanently. Aelin tried to ask for more details about the lock, but Brannon's time was up and he faded away. Aelin discovered that Adi and Lysander had been spying the whole time, which, to be fair, given Aelin's past, seemed quite a reasonable thing to do. They were halted suddenly by that otherworldly smell. That smell they knew all too well, the smell of the Volg. But this wasn't just any Volg, it was the chief overseer of Endovier. Aelin still dreamt of him and the relentless cruelty he subjected her to. Adian, sensing Aelin's panic, stepped in to help buy them time to calculate, but seeing Adian raise the sword of Orinth gave Aelin the courage she needed and she slammed her power into the overseer. But something was wrong. There was nothing inside for her magic to grab a hold of. The man was filled with a core of iron and wordstone. Aelin recoiled, vomiting and trying to recover. The man's heart punched through his chest, leaving nothing but ageless darkness and 2 golden eyes staring back at them with ancient malice. They were the eyes of Erawan. Chapter 16. Erawan's voice was from a different world, a different lifetime, a voice of ancient cruelty. Aelin's magic thrashed against it. Aelin knew she had to keep Erawan distracted so he would not be able to sense the word key tucked within the amulet of Orinth, and so she unleashed a torrent of magic so violent it seemed to shake the very ground. Erawan fought back with a punch of darkness right into Aelin's chest. Adian dragged Aelin to her feet after she was blasted back, and she released a second wave of flame, this time holding it until the overseer's body was nothing but ash. They agreed they needed to get on the ship and sail to Skull's Bay as fast as possible. As they made their way to the ship, Erawan's blow still reverberated against Aelin's bones in brutal ripples, a reminder that she might be the heir of fire, but Erawan was the king of darkness. Chapter 17. Manon sat in the Eyrie all night. She did not eat, she did not drink, and she did not sleep. She had done nothing but sharpen Windcleaver so that when the time came she could offer her cousin this one last gift, the words of request. The execution was to be held on the veranda. Asterin was brought to the front, and it was clear that Iskra had given her far more than 12 blows, but at least she'd had to literally chain Asterin up to beat her. Manon invoked the rite of execution, and the Blueblood matron granted her request. Manon stepped forward, and in the east, slipping over the mountains like molten gold, the sun began to rise. Manon ordered Sorrel to turn Asterin around so that she could see the dawn one last time. Manon drew Windcleaver, and Asterin whispered to Manon to take her body back to the cabin. It was that simple request that broke Manon, broke something in her so violently that she wondered if those around her could hear it. Manon understood in that moment that there were forces greater than obedience and discipline and brutality, understood that she had not been born soulless, she had not been born without a heart, for there were both begging her not to swing that blade. Manon met Sorrel's eyes and gave the 13 her final order. Run. Then Manon Blackbeak brought Windcleaver down upon her grandmother. Chapter 18. Manon and Granny B battled Thunderdome style, but Manon was bested when Granny B swiped at Manon's stomach, ripping leather and flesh. Manon rolled towards the edge of the veranda, reminding herself that she only had to last a few more minutes to give the 13 the time they needed to flee. And then her grandmother told her a truth so unbelievable it broke her. Manon's father was a Kraken prince, and she had spent her life slaying her kin, and the Kraken witch she had killed in the spring was her half-sister. Manon was a Kraken queen. A boom sounded nearby, and Manon rolled off the veranda into open air. Manon landed on the back of Abraxas, where she was met by Etta and Briar, who had been waiting in the shadows. 6 yellow-leg sentinels tailed them, and so Manon ordered that they each take 2 of them. Manon had flown this path on patrol day after day and knew it like the back of her hand, and so she and Abraxas flew, ultimately outmaneuvering both yellow-legs witches and their wyverns. Manon rasped out one final word, oak, before the darkness swept in to claim her. Chapter 19. Alid and Lorcan made it to the Acanthus River crossing and decided to get a bite to eat at the tavern to buy themselves some time to figure out how to get past the soldiers inspecting the river crossing. Aneth blessed them, and the lead cleverly talked their way into disguising themselves within a traveling carnival. As they made the crossing, they received news of what happened in Rifthold, stealing Alid's resolve that Aelin Galathinius would win this war, and only confirming for Lorcan that there would be nothing waiting for them in this war, nothing but a shallow grave. They successfully made their way across the river without being discovered. Chapter 20. Rowan and Dorian arrived in Skull's Bay just before a brutal storm began. They prepared to make their way to an inn before seeking out Rolfe, but they were stopped in their tracks when they found an ancient power. It was not that of the Volg, but something that made their magic cautious and curious. And just as quickly, it was gone. They instead found themselves right outside of Rolfe's headquarters, the Sea Dragon. The barmaid told them that Rolfe had been expecting them, and so she directed them to his office. Dorian didn't know what he expected from the Lord of the Pirates, but a dark-haired man who did not look a day past 30 was not it. And that concludes the book report.
Hot. Changed my,
Hot.
as you like to say.
Hot. No, literally, why is everything in this book so hot? Peril, hot.
Rolfe.
Danger, hot. Rolfe, hot.
Lord
No,
Kid.
literally everyone in this book is
Rowan.
hot, except for Granny B.
Yeah, that's so true.
Believe it or not, I do actually have a note in this set of chapters about how everyone in this book is hot, even Erawan. It's true.
I thought you were about to say. I even have a note about how hot Granny B is.
No, ew. No, I hate her. Even if she was hot, I would refuse to acknowledge it because I literally hate her. I
Fair
wanted
point,
her
yeah.
to die. I was
Same.
disappointed that she is still in the land of the living.
Oh, I'm sure her time is coming soon.
Well, yeah, but
Eventually.
soon, relative.
Well, anyways, thank you for those excellent summaries. And without further ado, let's jump into the analysis portion, starting with some overarching thoughts.
Okay, I'm so excited. Remember how last episode I was like, oh my God, this book is so crazy. I can't believe everything that's happening. This set of chapters blew the last one out of the water. Fucking Brannon showed up, then reintroducing Rolfe. And then, if that wasn't enough, SGM was like, surprise, motherfuckers, Manon is actually part Kraken. Everything with Manon and Granny B was unhinged. I was in no way prepared for that. Not even in the slightest. I guess, let me back up. I was prepared for Manon to basically run away. I knew there was going to be an attempt. Well, I didn't know. But, I was pretty sure they were going to rescue Asterin. But everything that Granny B said, no. Not even a single ounce of me was prepared to read that. I had to pick my jaw up off the floor. I mean, I literally had to hit rewind. I was like, no. There's no way. I heard that wrong. It cannot be. But no. It's true. I mean, we just kept getting hit with bomb after bomb. And so I'm just like super excited to talk about it. Also, surprisingly, I did not expect to laugh as much as I did. But Lorcan and Aelid's chapter was hysterical to me.
Yes.
I love that they're pretending to be married and part of a carnival. Never in a million years would I have guessed that's how their story would progress. And I am absolutely delighted by this course of events. It just fits. So all of their chapters, I'm like so psyched to read.
This probably wasn't on Lorcan's bingo card either. His wife.
God's above. God's above his wife. Oh my God. No, literally since I read that part, I've been like, I'll go up to my husband and be like, you're my husband until I say otherwise. And he's like, okay, like, obviously. I'm like, good. I just love saying that. So I encourage everyone to say that to their significant other. Last, I think chapter 17 may be one of the best chapters I've read throughout the entire series. All of the writing is phenomenal. The pacing, the tone, the tension. And that will be very evident in my favorite quotes because there were a lot. Some sets of chapters, I mean, I always enjoyed them, but I'm like, yeah, okay, what's your favorite? This one, no. Hit after hit after hit after hit. Like,
yes.
Oh, so good.
Top hits. I agree.
Hell
that was
yeah.
like such a great chapter, but just this whole set of chapters, there's so many good one-liners too. They're like simple sentences that, they just go hard, But yeah, 100% agree. Retweet to everything you said. I was floored to learn the truth about Manon. But I guess now that we know that, because, hindsight is 20/20 after all, it makes 1,000% sense about all the red cape symbolism and what Rhiannon, the Kraken, had said to Manon and how that was all foreshadowing. Oh, it's just so crazy. But it's so exciting to learn. And of course, we have the obligatory fuck Granny B because you just have to. I'm also highly anticipating the reunion with Rolfe because he just seems like such an exciting character, and I'm excited to see how he fits in the storyline moving forward. So,
I have
lots
some
to
real
talk
thoughts
about.
that. I think you and I came to the same conclusion or thought.
Ooh, yes.
About
excellent,
Rolfe.
Excellent. All right, so that concludes our overarching thoughts, and now let's get into the chapters, starting with chapter 13.
I do have an overarching thought for this chapter, and what?
Overarching thoughts, but I actually have another one.
Well, it's only for this specific chapter, okay? Anyway, my overarching thought for this specific chapter is mostly that I just thought it was a very lovely chapter. We really have not seen Dorian and Rowan interact really at all. And I thought this whole chapter was honestly very moving. I really enjoyed seeing a softer side of Rowan that was not prompted by Aelin, right? We see him be kind and sweet and gentle with Aelin, but not really anyone else. And so it was nice to see that side of him with someone who is not his mate. So
yeah, Rowan's playing like big brother to a lot of people. He started with Aelin, and now he's moving on to Dorian. So
he really is.
I agree. So Rowan and Dorian continue their journey south toward the Dead Islands, having stolen a new boat and also some food. And that was kind of funny to me because did Aelin not give Rowan any money?
I never really thought about it. But when you think about it, I feel like Aelin, Rowan, Aideen, and Dorian, really all the main characters should be super rich. But literally none of them ever have any money on them. Or it's like a handful of coins. And it's actually funnier the more you think about it. This did prompt a question. And so let me explain my thought process to you and how I got there. So I read what you said. And I was like, that's funny that Aelin didn't give him any money. I guess he was just in a hurry. And then I was like, wait, if she had given him money, where would it go when he shifted into a hawk? And then I was like, wait, where do his clothes go when he shifts into a hawk? Like, when he shifts back, is he just naked? And I would assume he keeps his clothes and supplies, because otherwise I feel like that definitely would have come up before this conversation. But yeah, I just want to know where his clothes go and, you know, his weapons, and if he would have had money, where would that have gone?
Right. It just goes into the pit of magic, I guess.
I
feel like we've had this conversation before or something similar about.
Have we?
Like, yeah, but it's still very relevant because they never tell us.
Yeah, and if there's going to be a naked Rowan shifting everywhere, I mean, oh no, that's terrible. I hate that. Hot.
So Rowan attempts to get a sullen Dorian to eat something and talk to him about his magic, but he is preoccupied with thoughts of a certain moon white-haired witch. I know Rowan and Manon's hair color is not new information, but the fact that it's made distinct makes me wonder if there is something about their lineage or who they are that makes it relevant. It's probably nothing, but no stone left unturned.
I mean, we just found out Manon is a Kraken, so maybe that's a distinct characteristic of Kraken witches or something, or it was representative of something. So no stone unturned.
Aside from this, Dorian thinks he knew she'd done it for whatever reasons were useful to her. She was as alien to him as the warrior sitting at the other end of the boat. And yet, that darkness, that violence and stark, honest way of looking at the world, there would be no secrets with her. No lies. I like this because, first of all, Dorian hasn't stopped thinking about Manon, though at this time he believes that she'd only saved him to further her own causes.
To be fair, I don't even think Manon really knows why she saved him. Not yet, anyways. I think it's more just some ancient instinct kicked in. I'm not even sure she could explain it.
She needs to move on to the romantic stage of love. She's just now learning about the concept of love, so...
Time to jump right into a relationship. That's what I like.
Yeah. Second, Dorian definitely senses something distinct about Manon, just as she does with him. I like this idea of sensing truths about each other because I feel like in the context of this conversation with Rowan, it's alluding to the idea that Dorian and Manon will be right for each other and they can understand each other in a unique way, just like Rowan and Aelin understand each other.
Lorraine, are you hinting that Manon and Dorian might be mates?
Maybe.
I am nowhere near that. I won't say never, but as of right now, they're not even friends. So
true, but like further down the line. Anytime you start talking about an ancient part of them was drawn to the other one, I'm like, mates.
Okay, that's fair.
Rowan turns the convo back to Dorian's magic, and he reminds him that without training, his magic will, quote, consume you and wield you like a tool. Rowan jokes about Aelin using her powers on frivolous things as an example to demonstrate that it seems like magic wielders always need to continuously use some of their excess magic so that it won't overtake them.
Honestly, I'm with Aelin. I would do so much frivolous shit with my magic. That's probably why I have not been awarded it in this life.
Bring me a treat.
For real, though. Y'all don't want to see me with magic. Let me tell you that right now. It would not be good for anyone. That's... Hell yeah. Yep. That's what I'm saying. I would use it on the most mundane things. It's not good for me. But it did make me wonder what Rowan does to keep that edge off of his magic. I don't know if he has as much power in magic as Aelin, but he has a significant amount that would be comparable to Aelin's. So I do wonder what he does to help take the edge off.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess right now, at least, he's definitely using probably most of it to protect Dorian.
Yeah, I don't think he's worried about that right now. But when his life isn't in peril, what is he doing?
True. Anyways, aside from that, I also appreciated that Rowan recognizes Dorian's hesitant state about his own magic and how he's used it so far when he says, quote, "The choice is yours, how much you allow it into your life, how to use it. But go any longer without mastering it, Majesty, and it will destroy you." We discussed this last episode about Dorian's guilt over his own use of magic so far and how he still believes his magic is something that only brings destruction between the glass castle, his father, and Sorsh's death. I like that Rowan recognizes Dorian didn't get to choose whether to have magic, but he can choose how he uses it.
True, but I think it's also really important to note that Rowan is also warning Dorian that completely ignoring his magic is dangerous and basically impossible. He doesn't have to let it become a core part of his identity, but he does at least have to learn how to learn some control so it literally does not consume him.
I like, though, that this continues to feed the theme of how everyone has a choice and how they react to the various circumstances of life. Magic in general is inherently neutral in this world, just like the word marks. It can be used for bad or good, but that all depends on the magic wielder. I think by accepting his magic and choosing to learn how to control it, it will also help Dorian regain some sense of agency and comfortability with it. Choice has always been a big part thematically for Dorian's character, but I think this will be a choice that will help him gain back his own identity when he starts to use it for good.
I think that is really excellent analysis, especially your note about choice. I hadn't thought about it until you said it, but even going as far back as TOG, it seems Dorian has always felt like he didn't have the power to make choices for his own life, and he's always felt constrained by that. And of course, the ultimate manifestation of that was having a Wordstone collar put on him and being controlled by a Vault Prince. I think that lack of ability to make choices has really defined Dorian's character. And now that he has the ability to make his own choices, within the constraints of what's happening in the book, he does ultimately have freedom. If he wanted to get on a ship and sail to the southern continent and never mess with Aurelia ever again, he could. I really think we're going to see that drive his character development throughout the rest of the series.
I also thought it was touching that Rowan is becoming a friend and mentor to Dorian when he confides in him that he hadn't been able to save his mate, Lyria. At this point, Dorian thinks about how his magic, quote, had felt the bond between Aelin and Rowan, the bond that went deeper than blood, than their magic, and then wonders what it meant if Rowan already had a mate before Aelin. And I was like, oh, I'll tell you what it means. Either Lyria wasn't his mate or somehow Rowan has two. Either way, we've talked about this before, but add it to the mate theory log.
All I want to say is thank you, Dorian. He has the exact same hang up I do. I truly believe at this point, Aelin and Rowan are mates, especially because Dorian literally thinks about how his own magic has sensed that between them. Honestly, this question better get resolved because I will never know peace until this gets explained. So that better happen. Let me just say that.
It forever plagues us.
I know, I really want to Google it, but then I remind myself, well, we don't even know for sure that they're mates, so then I definitely can't. And then I feel like there may be an explanation, so I really won't be able to Google it if I need to until the end of the series. So I'm just like, damn it.
Gotta be patient for now. Gotta
I
keep
hate
reading.
that. Hate it. Yuck.
Rowan continues playing Big Brother, and I loved his advice. He says, "You're going to hate the world, Dorian. You're going to hate yourself. You will hate your magic, and you will hate any moment of peace or happiness. But I had the luxury of a kingdom at peace and no one depending upon me. You do not." So we know Dorian didn't get to choose whether to have magic or the state of the world, but he can decide his future from here on out. Magic is both a great power, but it's also a burden in many ways, because I think for our characters that have good morals, they also know they have a responsibility to use their magic to help everyone, especially in the current environment with Erawan, where it really is going to come down to magic wielders to make the biggest difference in the war against him. Dorian asks how it will look to his people that he is fleeing and whether he'd, quote, yielded his kingdom to Erawan. Rowan advises that he'll need to make it clear to the people that he is not abandoning them, but instead is leaving to find help. At this point, we are reminded that back in Heir of Fire, General Narok and Erawan's forces pushed Rolfe out of the Dead Islands. Rowan advises Dorian to take advantage of the situation and make an alliance between them. And he says, if promising Rolfe money and free reign to loot Erawan's ships will secure us an armada in the south, we'd be fools to shy away from it. Based on how empty Skull's Bay is later in Chapter 20, I'm kind of nervous that Rolfe's fleet took a much greater hit against the Valg than Rowan anticipated at this time, or that everyone realized they couldn't fight against the Valg and they just fled. And that makes me worry. Even if they could get Rolfe as an ally, if he doesn't have a fleet, where would that leave them?
I think that's a very reasonable concern, but I also think it's important to remember that they're trying to get other fleets of warships to join them, and even just having Rolfe as an ally so they can use the Dead Islands as a staging ground for war is going to be really helpful and important.
On the other hand, we do know that Rolfe has that magical map on his hand that I also think could be useful now that magic is free again. I really am very curious about what the dealio is with that. On a lighter note, I did enjoy that Dorian muses he'd never met a pirate before, and Rowan jokes, you met Aelin when she was pretending to be Selena, which is hilarious because I'm sure in this moment Rowan was 100% thinking about Aelin's arrival in Varys when she was basically a drunk vagrant stealing Tegia from vendor carts.
Honestly, this whole exchange was hysterical to me because Rowan then adds, I can promise you Rolfe won't be much worse. And Dorian says, that's not reassuring.
In a touching moment of vulnerability, Dorian asks Rowan's help in learning about magic. Rowan agrees he'll teach him about control and spiraling down into his power, but notes that Dorian's magic, quote, is something he'd rarely encountered.
He also says, we may find someone who escaped the butchers, someone to instruct you more than I can. I wondered if this is foreshadowing we're going to meet another character that has similar magic to Dorian, or at least has been exposed to it in some way or has some knowledge of it, because I feel like that's an issue in this story, that Dorian must be trained so that he can be useful in the war. It's important to his character's journey, and Rowan is already setting us up that he has limitations in that. So I think we'll likely meet someone, or maybe we already have and we just didn't know, that will be more able to help Dorian.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. I love this entire interaction because it shows Dorian is willing to learn and is choosing hope. But it also shows how humble Dorian actually is. Rowan tells him it was a rare man indeed who asked for help when he needed it, who would put aside his pride. We discussed this last episode and we'll probably keep talking about it. This conversation reinforces the idea that Dorian's raw magic is something completely unique and different from the typical type of magic Rowan is used to seeing, and he notes that it's also different from Aelin's magic. Aelin and Rowan are Karanam and share a connection. Aelin also has a divinely gifted magic from Mala, and we know that Elena inherited magic because of Mala. But if Dorian's was similar, I feel like it would be recognizable to Rowan. And the fact that it's not makes me feel like maybe, I guess it is still part of this broader word-based magic, or his part Valgness has altered his magic and makes it different. Again, doing a lot of speculating here, but I really am excited and look forward to learning more about Dorian's magic. To close the chapter, I found it interesting that Dorian asked Rowan whether he immediately knew Aelin was his love. I guess since mate is unconfirmed. And Rowan snorts and says no, but we let each other out of it, found a way together. My spidey senses are tingling, and I think Dorian is asking because he's thinking about Manon.
Oh my gosh, I thought the exact same thing. It's like in a movie when the teenager asks their parents or another adult, how do you know if you're in love? Why else would you ask? Mm-hmm. You know he's thinking about Manon.
Sure is. That moonlight-haired witch. Overall, I love this chapter for the developing camaraderie between Rowan and Dorian, and that it signals Dorian is going to be okay, because Rowan tells him, you will find your way too, Dorian. You'll find your way out. I think Rowan really understands what Dorian is feeling, having experienced many similar things between losing someone he loves, having really strong magic, and just his general wise understanding of the circumstances they are facing from his own past experiences. It makes me heart happy. It makes my heart happy to know Dorian has a friend in Rowan now.
I think you're channeling your inner pirate. It makes me heart happy. That's what I heard when you said it like that. Me heart. Yeah.
All right, so that ends chapter 13. Moving on to chapter 14. We start off with Adian's POV, who is currently watching Aelin scale the walls of a building for their temple take-back mission. Adian reflects on how different Ilium now was from his past visits as part of the Bane, and he thinks in all of those visits to the town, he never imagined traversing these streets with his queen, or that her face would be so grave as she took in the frightened, unhappy people, the scars of war.
This quote is very somber, but I did think it was really funny when Adian thought, usually he and his Bane had camped outside the town walls and enjoyed themselves so thoroughly at the taverns that he wound up puking in his own helmet the next morning. You got some real juxtaposition, right? The scars of war and puking in your own helmet. So
he next begins to reflect on their ploy to sneak onto a southbound ship in the morning and some very important information he learned from the captain of the ship, who they paid off to turn a blind eye. Apparently, 50 warships sailing in Queen Maeve's name were spotted rallying along the western coast of Wendelin. When Aelin had asked whether it seemed like Queen Maeve has allied with Morath or if she's coming to assist Harrison, the captain had said neither. And I was like, oh shit. Maeve is planning on coming to Aurelia. My first question, of course, is why now? What prompted her sudden move? My best guess is that she's making moves to get the word keys and likely knows Erawan is fully back and after them, in addition to Aelin's maneuvers to get them. Given what we learned from Brannon in the next chapter about Maeve's ancientness, which is definitely pretty heavily implying Maeve is actually a Valg. She knows way more about the keys, the word gate, and has experience with Erawan for sure. Also, since we learn about the lock in the next chapter, does Maeve know about the lock as well?
We'll talk more about whether Maeve is Valg or not when we get there, but let's assume for this question that she is. Do you think it's possible that Maeve has also been inhabited by another Valg king? It's never confirmed whether they were killed or sent back to the word gate. It's assumed. So their true fates are unknown. I can't remember where this was, but I swear I remember Erawan being described as the youngest Valg king, and we don't know anything about the three kings dynamic. Were they brothers that got along? Did they hate each other? Were they always trying to outdo each other for power? It's very possible there was infighting between the Valg kings. So if Maeve was a Valg king, it seems like she could be working against Erawan for power and control of the keys instead of working with him. And that would explain her independent action. And of course, I'm making an assumption here that Maeve is Valg, which we will talk about. I firmly believe she is. I don't give a shit what Brannon says. I'm going to drop that here because I feel very strongly about that.
No, I definitely agree. I don't remember learning about the ages of any of the Valg kings. I just remember Erawan was one of the Valg kings. I do have a thought about Maeve being a Valg. I don't think she's inhabited by a Valg king necessarily.
Okay.
There when we get there. But I do agree, it seems like she's kind of working against Erawan. Because like if she has experience with the Valg in the past, she doesn't really seem keen on uniting with them. Like if anything, she's kept away from it, right? Over the past several hundred years since then. So I don't know.
I think what's most confusing to me is it seems like Erawan controls all Valg creatures, anything made with dark magic, right? So if Maeve is a Valg, which you and I both agree that she is, how can she not be controlled by Erawan? In my mind, the only logical way she could deny his call or control would be if she was of equal power, who has the same amount of power as a Valg king, another Valg king. I don't know. It's confusing, and I'm definitely going to be thinking about it a lot.
I did briefly wonder, though, if Lorcan told Maeve something, since we know Lorcan originally came looking for the keys on behalf of Maeve. But then again, we also know Lorcan has no intention of giving the keys to Maeve. So it seems kind of unlikely that he's been updating her, or at least not updating her truthfully. To move on, Aiden continues to watch Aelin, who is now on the rooftop, and thinks surely Maeve would not be so stupid. Perhaps the two dark rulers would destroy each other in their bid for power, and likely destroy this continent in the process. But a dark king and a dark queen united against the Firebringer. They had to act quickly, cut off one snake's head before dealing with the other. So I really honed in on Adian's wording of a dark king and a dark queen. I'm taking that as additional foreshadowing and evidence to support that Maeve is in fact a Valg, as we both agree about. But specifically, if Erawan is a Valg king, what if Maeve is a Valg queen?
Ooh, I love that.
And that would resolve the hierarchy situation too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So
She's Valg royalty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Sneaky
that's
little
interesting.
lines.
And if there are Valg queens, we wouldn't know anything about them. They may not have the same characteristic gold eyes. They may be able to mask their power differently. It can open up a lot of possibilities. Wow, I love that. Okay, that's canon. Yep, she's a Valg queen.
We love it, but it's also scary. And this definitely also makes it clear that Maeve is going to be a problem, and obviously we don't trust Maeve.
Retweet. My question now is, what is her plan? What is she going to do with the 50 warships? Is she planning to dock somewhere and march across the continent, or is she just going to wage attacks from the sea? Because she's not allying with Aelin, she's not allying with Erawan.
What is she doing?
What is she doing? Yeah, and that's my biggest outstanding question, other than the fact, is she Valg? Those are my two big questions for Maeve.
So Lysandra interrupts Adian's thoughts to comment. She's accepted Darrow's decree too calmly. It's the calm before the storm, Adian. And then Adian replies, "You're not frightened of." And then he trails off. I am assuming he was wondering if Lysandra was afraid of Aelin's power, but that is not the case. And instead, Lysandra makes a very interesting comment, alluding to her unease about Aelin's seemingly prophetic future. She says, "The more I think about it, the more it seems like this was all planned, laid out long ago. Erawan had decades before Aelin was born to strike, decades during which no one with her powers or Dorian's powers existed to challenge him. Yet, as fate or fortune would have it, he moves now, at a time when a firebringer walks the earth." And then she adds, "Morath is unleashing its horrors, Maeve stirs across the sea, two goddesses walk hand in hand with Aelin. More than that, Mala and Deanna have watched over her the entirety of her life. But perhaps it wasn't watching. Perhaps it was shaping, so they might one day unleash her too. And I wonder if the gods have weighed the cost of that storm and deemed the casualties worth it." All of this definitely seems to indicate that there is some sort of divine interference from the gods to keep everything held back, perhaps even keeping Erawan back somehow, until they knew for sure there would be people specifically capable of defeating Erawan, aka Aelin and Dorian. Even more so, it seems like Mala and Deanna have directly influenced Aelin's path to get her to this point, knowing that she is basically the ultimate weapon against Erawan, essentially.
Okay, I did not intend for my commentary on this quote to become a TED Talk, but here we go. I think there are two ways you can read this, and actually, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they can both be true at the same time. Let me break down my viewpoints for you based on Lysandra's quote. I'm calling the first one the Erawan theory. You can very easily read Lysandra's comment as Erawan himself has purposely been waiting to strike, and that purpose has something to do with Aelin and her power, as well as Dorian and his power. There could also be other unknown variables at play, but we know based on what Ghislaine told Manon and Asterin after the first time Brannon and Maeve crushed Erawan, he fled to Aurelia and spent 1,000 years rebuilding, and he waited until he noticed Brandon's light was dimming before he decided to attack. Based on his history, we know Erawan has no trouble biding his time and thinks strategically about when he wants to attack. He's truly, truly immortal. 1,000 years is nothing to him. That's literally a drop in the bucket. Lysandra very astutely recognizes that it's quite a coincidence that he has chosen now to attack. That leads me to the conclusion that Erawan doesn't necessarily intend to kill Dorian and Aelin, but instead he wants to use them and enslave them as he did with Kaltain. There is something about their magic and power that is special and useful to Erawan. Maybe it's to give himself more power, or a way to control the word gate. Maybe he intends to enslave them, like he did with Kaltain, and use them to enter other worlds and basically make them use their power to destroy those worlds and enslave them as well. And that is my big ooh, like that's why he's waiting for them. Because why would Erawan only want this world when he can have them all? I feel like in the 1,000 years between wars, he could have probably rolled in and taken over everyone, but he waited until Aelin and Dorian came into their power. I don't think that's a
good
coincidence.
point. Yeah. He even threatens later, I think in the next chapter, right? If I get Rowan and Dorian, for example, like I'll just enslave them and use them for my own purposes. So,
Exactly. Because Dorian and Aelin, Rowan, all of them, to Erawan, if they're dead, they're useless. But alive, he can put a word key in them. I mean, Aelin right now could bring down an entire continent pretty much single-handedly, right? So imagine what she could do filled with dark power. So that's my Erawan theory.
I don't like it.
Nope, me neither. As I was
it's
writing
a great
it,
thought, but I don't like it.
As I was writing this, I was like, damn it, this is a really oh shit. So 10-4 on that. My second point I'm titling the God's Interference Theory. We know that Aelin and Gavin were able to capture and entomb Erawan with the help or interference of gods. Back in chapter 35 of TOG, Dorian tells Solana, Gavin and Elena found themselves defenseless against him. He was about to kill the princess when a spirit appeared and gave her the necklace. So we know a quote-unquote spirit, aka probably a god, intervened then. It would stand to reason they would continue to intervene now. Lorraine, you pointed out on the last episode that Aelin is doubly blessed by the gods Mala and Deanna, which Lysandra confirms in this quote. I think there's a strong probability that Lysandra is right that Mala and Deanna, Elena, Gavin, Brannon, some of them, all of them, whoever is not just watching over her, but in a sense they are manipulating her journey for their own purposes, which seems to be Erawan. Literally in the set of chapters, Brannon basically manipulates her into coming to Ilium so he can tell her to go get the lock, right? Elena in TOG is constantly appearing her and do what needs to be done, right? There's also a precedent for God's interference. Remember back in Calm, the infamous chapter 25, the conversation between the princess and the queen, aka Nehemia and Elena, where they quite literally orchestrated Nehemia's death together to manipulate Aelin into action. So what is most troubling about this theory being true is exactly what Lysandra says at the end. And I wonder if the gods have weighed the cost of that storm and deemed the casualties worth it. And I feel like we're slowly starting to build in this thematic undertone of the gods perhaps not being as benevolent as they've been portrayed. I don't think they're evil or anything, but gods play a very different game, right? Their plans reach into the future of thousands of years and potentially all worlds. So I can easily see in their calculations saying, well, we'll have to sacrifice this world, but it will save the rest. You see what I'm saying? So I'm wondering if we're going to see more of that start to build.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had pulled out that last little bit too. I wonder if the gods have weighed the cost and deemed the casualties worth it. I feel like that suggests we are basically on the verge of a mass extinction scale war. But the gods feel that all the casualties will be worth it to defeat the Valg once and for all. They know there's going to be a lot of people dying. And, combined with some of the discussions of Rowan's thoughts from last episode, it makes me really nervous that Aelin is going to be used as a sacrifice in the end by the gods. Like, she's the one character who's been used the most by gods and spirits and all that stuff.
Yeah, and Aelin, that is a core of her character. She will sacrifice herself over and over to protect the people she loves. And so she's really primed for that.
Yes, I agree. Choosing to keep things lighthearted instead, Aedion jokes with Lysandra about getting under her skins and then thinks he knew there were lines with Lysandra, boundaries he wouldn't cross, not after what she'd endured since childhood, not after what he'd been through too, even if he hadn't yet told Aelin about it. First of all, I love that despite the flirtatious feelings developing between them, Aedion is being respectful towards Lysandra. Second, poor Aedion. We don't really know much about Aedion's experience over the last 10 years, but this makes it clear that there is a lot of trauma he has yet to process for a lot of horrible things that were done to him.
I gotta be honest, the way this conversation played out filled me with absolute dread. It seems like Aedion was sexually abused. And I actually feel like there was another allusion to that back in Heir of Fire. It's when they're taking Ren to the opium den. And I remember I was joking about the way it was phrased was Aedion hadn't taken a woman to his bed in a long time. And I was like, oh, what if Aedion's gay? And that kind of ruins my book boyfriend dreams, right?
Oh.
But now I'm wondering, I would need to go back and reread that part. But I bet if you read it again, I bet it reads more like he has not been intimate with anyone because potentially of some trauma or something. And he does always refer to himself as Otterlin's whore. I always took that to mean he had to work for them and do their bidding, but maybe he means it in a literal sense.
Ooh.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, poor Aedion.
I know.
To take a more lighthearted turn, Aedion and Lysandra exchange some flirty banter, and then he goes back to internally thinking about love. We get a little glimpse into how badly Aedion does want to experience love of his own choosing with someone when he thinks about Rowan and Aelin's love for each other, and Lysandra's clear love for Evangeline, which he could tell preoccupied many of her thoughts. I think the contrast we see between Aedion's internal thoughts and his reflection on the relationships around him is important because Aedion has kind of been on the outside. Of course, he's loved by his family and loved for his loyalty and his skill as a warrior, but I think that's, this is a different kind of love from being loved because someone chose you as their person.
I think Aedion's thoughts here demonstrate that difference. There's a love that is instinctual, like his love for Aelin, or Lysandra's love for Evangeline, but what Aedion really desires is a love that he chooses, and more importantly, chooses him back.
Yeah.
I really want that for him.
I do too. Aedion thinks he'd never tell her this in 1,000 years, but looking at Aelin and Rowan, he sometimes envied them. As you just said, I want Aedion to find love as well. And in parentheses, I wrote, yes, I still very much think it's going to be with Lysandra.
A retweet. This is all I want, and I don't feel like it's too much to ask for, so give it
Probably
to me.
Not. Aedion also thinks about the letter Aelin had sent to the Ash Rivers and how Darrow had said they had once been betrothed. He had no romantic interest in Aelin, but he also decided he didn't want to know what Aelin had written in the letter. I don't think Aelin would reintroduce marriage with Aedion to get an alliance with Wendelin, but I do wonder what she said to try and get their help. Would she offer a marriage with Gallon Ash River or somebody else? Again, I don't think this is actually going to happen, but just curious.
I agree. I am too very curious. I definitely feel like regardless, whatever was in the letter to Wendelin will come up again. We're not done with that conversation.
At this point, Aelin signals with blue flames that it was time to take back the temple. Lysandra shifts into a ghost leopard and roars to draw out the soldiers and townspeople to bear witness. I got shivers at the description of Aelin, who jumps down in front of the soldiers, and it says, "A crown of fire appeared atop Aelin's hair, as the cloth smothering Goldrin burned away and the ruby glowed blood red."
You gotta give it to her. Aelin has fucking style, okay? The blue flames around the fingertips, the crown of flames appearing on her head, all while that damn cloth covering her giant-ass powerful sword burns away. Hot damn. Hot damn is all I have to say. Like, that shit's dope as hell. The crown of flames really does it for me. That shit is so cool.
Aedion relays the message to leave now or die, basically. And then he thinks, the flame around Aelin's head burned brighter, a beacon in the dark. Symbols have power indeed. Honestly, I'm just kind of like picturing Aelin as literally Mala herself. And I was like, ooh, a new Halloween costume unlocked, perhaps?
Yes. 10-4. Yep. Sign me up.
Also, I wonder if by describing her crown as a beacon, there is some double meaning, both to signal that Ilium is free again, and also to foreshadow the Valg/Erawan's appearance right after her meeting with Brannon. Regardless, you can tell that the townspeople definitely understood the message, especially when Aedion draws the Sword of Orinth, and then it says, "Someone cried out at the sight of that ancient, mighty blade." Many of the soldiers flee at this point, but the commander remains sneering. Wrong choice, idiot. Aelin proceeds to burn him from the inside out, doing all of this as if blowing out a candle. And then he disintegrates into ash. And I was like, take that, bitch.
You're such a good hype girl. You're like, yeah!
Always.
Gotta be honest, that description was horrifying, amazing, awesome, but also gruesome. I literally cannot believe that a single soldier stayed after witnessing that. If I would have saw that, I would have been like, Nah, brah. So sorry. We thought you were the other. You know what? It's a misunderstanding. We're going to go now. Like, are you kidding me? The fact that they stood their ground, those soldiers are crazy.
Yeah, obviously this was no parlor trick. But Adian, Lysandra, and Aelin proceed to take down the remaining soldiers in an easy 20 minutes.
I like the way this is written in the physical book. There's a break in the chapter to indicate we moved into the next scene. And I was cackling when I read that first sentence. They took the temple back in 20 minutes. Just like deadpan. Yep. I was like, yep, that tracks.
I love that there were townspeople that joined in too, because it signifies that the people are fighting back and that they understand the meaning of doing so. So after getting back the temple, Aelin proceeds to clean the desecrated temple of all the dirt and debris to reveal the glorious ancient carvings beneath, etched into every pillar and step and wall. Aelin also notes that the temple has an ancient rock held in the temple proper, and she heads there for a moment alone, leaving Adian and Lysandra in the archives. We get some quick foreshadowing of Brannon's presence when Aelin thinks she'd left men for Adian to take down because, quote, she was not the only symbol here tonight. Not the only one who watched.
Ooh, that's a really good catch. I did not pick up on that. I thought that meant the townspeople and the citizens of Terrasen, and she wanted them to see Adian fighting for them so that news of what happened here would spread. So it's not just support for Aelin, but also Lysandra and Adian, essentially her court.
It's probably both, honestly. I think it's like just for many. I also found it notable that Aelin notes Lysandra is perched on a beam in her falcon form, staring at the enormous rendering of a sea dragon carved into the floor. Since Lysandra is a shifter, will Lysandra shift into a sea dragon at some point? Or, now that it's on the table that Dorian may have shifting capabilities, perhaps Dorian will turn into a sea dragon as well?
Ooh, or I also thought it might just be foreshadowing that the Mycenians and their sea dragons will return.
That too, yes.
All of it. Check. All of the above. Yes.
Aelin proceeds to the heart of the temple, to the black rock, which is described as being smooth as glass, and then she extinguishes every flame except for a sole white candle in the center. Without any word marks or messages from the little folk, just swirls and stags, Aelin steps up on the sacred rock. I did kind of wonder what the swirls are. It probably doesn't matter, but Elena's tomb had swirls and stuff too, I think, so that kind of makes me believe that they are special. Maybe they just mark the area as a space where the spirit realms can meet with living realms or something. I don't know.
You know, they've actually come up a few different times. At the end of Queen of Shadows, when she finally makes it to Terrasen, there's a big rock that's supposed to mark the borderline. And it was also described with having similar markings. I remember wondering about it at the time, but now it's come up often enough that it is starting to make me wonder if it has an even larger significance.
So anyways, that ends chapter 14. Moving on to chapter 15.
I also have an overarching thought for this chapter. I feel completely vindicated. Y'all know that I have been complaining about Elena and how she'd pop up and say all this cryptic, unhelpful shit and then disappear. And Aelin fucking called them out. I was so giddy in this chapter because, number one, motherfucking Brannon appears, which, you know, just sent me over the moon. And two, Aelin was funny as hell, and I loved every second of it.
So Aelin takes out the word key and sits down. At first, it doesn't seem like anything is going to happen. But then, the spirit of Brannon appears. I was absolutely shocked by this. I know we've been asking what happened to Brannon forever, but I actually didn't think we'd literally meet him. I just assumed we learned more about his story or something, you know? So to have his spirit come back and talk to Aelin, I was like, oh.
Same. I was honestly stunned my first time reading this chapter. But then if you think about it, Gavin and Elena have both appeared, and even Nehemia. So why not Brannon, you know?
True.
I guess it's just because he's so much older, but I agree. I did not see that coming at all. That was totally out of left field for me.
So I did wonder, though, do you think the word key activated something on the stone? Mostly I'm just wondering how Brannon was called. Because Aelin, like, actively takes the word key out and then, like, steps up onto the stone. I was just curious if maybe that had something to do with why he appeared, but I don't know.
That's a good question. We don't get any description of her, quote unquote, using it. There's no description of her holding it up or feeling a pulse of magic, as is often described, like when the lead used it to fill her with a presence when she was facing the Ilkin. I think it's more likely that Brannon has been waiting for her to come because it is his temple and he has a stronger connection to this place. That probably allows him to appear more easily. And he does say something to the effect of he specifically sent the little folk to send her a message. So I think he was probably kind of hanging out and waiting.
That makes sense. So I actually really enjoyed that Brannon is this humorous spirit, but I also thought it was notable that he has a pale glimmer of blue light outlining him. We've seen blue light be associated with Elena's power or when the Eye of Elena was used, so maybe this is a link to the Galathinius lineage or maybe Mala's divine influence?
That's a good call out. Also remember that Aelin can summon blue flames, and she does use them in the battle against Adarlanian soldiers to get back Brannon's temple. And we know she uses them again against Erawan when he appears momentarily. I was also absolutely cackling when Brannon first appears and he tells Aelin he can't stay long. And she responds with, "But you're going to manage to cram in as many cryptic warnings as you can, right?" And I was like, yes, I know this was my overarching thought for the chapter, but I just wanted to repeat it again because somebody had to say it, and it's going to be Aelin. And so hopefully Brannon can relay that back. Okay, guys, the next time we're going to show up, we need to come up with a little more information and be able to talk faster.
Highly doubtful, but we can dream.
Yeah, we can dream.
Aelin jumps straight into asking questions, starting with Maeve. She asks Brannon, can she be killed? Brannon starts by saying she is old, heir of Terrasen. She was old when I was a child. Her plans far-reaching. I like that Brannon calls her the heir of Terrasen because that helps legitimize Aelin's claim. But of course, it's red flags all around to know that Maeve has lived far longer than any Fae we know of. I was a little peeved Aelin cut Brannon off because what plans was he alluding to? But when asked if a blade to the heart will kill Maeve, Brannon says, I don't know. All Fae may be killed, yet she has outlived even our extended lifespans and her power. No one really understands her power. She has long feared my flame and yours. We're building up to the very big reveal. Aelin then asks if Maeve is a Valg, and Brannon laughs it off to say, as cold as one, but no. And I was like, giant red flag. Absolutely. Maeve is a flag.
You're like that guy on TikTok, the red flag guy. I love him.
Yes. That is me. I am him. As soon as we learn she's literally even older than Brannon ever was, she's afraid of their fire. And then with this joke, by this point, I was like, okay, yeah, it would make so much sense if Maeve is a Valg. We've always felt something was off and extra nefarious about Maeve. So this totally reframes everything that we know about her now.
Wow, when I read this, I felt really emphatic because I wrote in all caps motherfucking retweet. I still strongly agree. I felt a little less charged up in this moment. But before Aelin even asked, I was like, oh, she's a Valg. I do not care if Brannon said she's not. He has to be wrong. I have no logical explanation for how that's possible. But the maths. She's basically as old as Erawan. We had the discussion about Fae lifespans in the last episode. They are not actually immortal. They just have extremely long lifespans that can span over hundreds, if not thousands of years. But they are not truly immortal like Erawan is. And she's also scared of firepower, which, as you said, red flag. That screams Val to me. There's also all those descriptions back in Heir of Fire of just how cruel and cold and calculating she is, how she likely abuses in pretty horrific ways the cadre. I know there's descriptions of like how Rowan had been whipped by Maeve. Maeve seems like someone who gets joy out of inflicting pain upon others. And that is a Valg trademark.
Yeah.
So I don't know how she's hiding it, how Brannon doesn't know that, but she has to be.
Oh, yeah. I definitely agree. If Maeve is in fact a Valg, then obviously that leaves many questions. Why doesn't she want to align with Erawan? If anything, it seems like she's avoided him and the Valg in general up until now. Is she afraid of Erawan? Why hasn't she really taken any action to dominate the world like Erawan if she is a Valg? And then ultimately, of course, what is her agenda with the word keys?
All excellent questions. I know we sort of had this conversation earlier in the episode. I think our possibility of her being inhabited by a Valg King has potential. I think of all queen, like you said. If either one of those are the case, it would make sense that Maeve and Erawan would compete against each other for the keys and power instead of working together.
Hopefully we'll learn the answer soon, but it's definitely safe to say it is imperative that Maeve does not get those keys. Keep her paws off. The conversation shifts to Aelin asking Brannon if the power ever gets easier to handle. Brannon's response was notable, and he says how it impacts your relationships with those around you becomes harder than managing the power, yet is tied to it as well. Magic is no easy gift in any form, yet fire we burn not just within our magic, but also in our very souls. First of all, I think Brannon understands that magic changes relationships because it affects how people will see you. Will they fear you, revere you, be jealous of you? I think it also continues to support the idea that magic does not really grant one with freedom. It instead seems to add responsibilities to anyone who has it.
That is excellent analysis. I'll only add that we have seen exactly what you described, and that is how people react to Aelin's power. There is a wide range of responses to her, and a lot of them are not really positive.
Second, I think by stating their fire burns not just their magic, but also their souls, it's alluding to the idea that Aelin's magic will require her to make choices that mark her soul in different ways because they are entering into a huge world war, basically, and Aelin's fire is one of the greatest weapons they have against the Val. What sacrifices and decisions will Aelin have to make in order to win this war?
Damn, you're on fire today, boo. Excellent analysis. Chef's kiss. Agree.
At this point, Aelin makes a bad joke about Elena's lack of humor. Oops. And Brannon gets real with her. It turns out there is another magical object at play. And this is the lock, which is currently somewhere in, quote, the stone marshes in a sunken city. The lock's purpose is to bind the keys into the word gate and seal it permanently. Brannon follows this with, "My daughter begs you." And I was like, what? Ain't nothing can never just be easy. New side quest unlocked. But since Elena is begging for Aelin to find it, has Elena used it before? Why didn't Elena tell Aelin about this when she mentioned the keys in the first place?
As soon as Brannon said this, I was like, no, we do not need something else to worry about, okay? No, thank you. We have enough going on. It's like, God damn it.
Right.
Damn it. To answer your question, Brannon says the lock is needed to bind the keys back into the broken word gate. To me, that means Elena didn't use the lock because based on the Nightfall chapter, it doesn't seem like her plan ever involved actually trying to get rid of the word keys or really anything to do with them. It was merely to contain Erawan long enough for the next generation of fae, humans, whatever combination of people to fight against Erawan. So I'm not confident that she did. It also begs the question, why didn't Brannon use the lock? At one point, he had the 3 keys. So there's some confusion about the timeline on that because he's the one who hid the keys from Maeve. I mean, I would assume there's a reason he wasn't able to put them back into the word gate. I don't know. I've got a lot of questions about that.
Same. But most importantly, Elena knew about it. So I'm like, why didn't you say anything?
And didn't say anything about it. Yeah. Yup.
Anyways, without any more answers, Brannon disappears, and then Aelin surprises Aelin, having overheard everything. Aelin asks when Aelin planned on informing them about this new information, but she insists that their plan to get allies first and foremost was still the first priority. Lysandra also flies in, and I liked that Aelin says, "New court, new traditions. Even for you, starting with fewer schemes and secrets that take years off my life every time you do a grand reveal."
I mean, Aelin's not wrong. That really is Aelin's MO, so, respect.
But we are not done with the twists yet, because frickin' Valg shows up. Aelin immediately realizes that Erawan had been waiting for this meeting far longer than a few hours. The cherry on top, though, is that this Valg is the chief overseer of Endovier. And I was so enraged on Aelin's behalf. Erawan is vile for this.
I hate Erawan. But I have to say, so far, he's an incredible villain. Because what kind of dark, horrific mind do you have to come up with this? This is particularly horrible. So I hate him, but I mean, he's a good villain.
Aelin musters her courage despite the horrifying reminder of her past, and at the sight of the sword of Orinth Aedian raised, Aelin summons her fire. Interestingly, the Amulet of Orinth, aka the Word Key, seems to grumble and flicker with raw ancient power, which I think is representative of the power responding to protect Aelin in a way, just like we saw it do for Aelin in the last set of chapters. Before the Overseer gets a chance to continue taunting her, Aelin blasts him with her fire, but this time she uses flames that did not burn, flame that was mere light, blindingly white. If you know, you know with another SJM series, but it sort of feels like this burst of light is like the purest form of divine power in a way, because it directly combats with the darkness of the Valg.
This makes sense, especially because we've gotten a lot of imagery and description that basically boils down to light versus dark, good versus evil.
Much to Aelin's surprise, however, it turns out this Overseer was already so freaking evil that there was no darkness left anyway. Aelin notes there was nothing inside to grab onto, no darkness to burn out, no remaining ember to breathe life into. This line stuck out to me because it almost sounds like having any sort of soul or life force left can be detected by magic. And the fact that there was nothing indicates that the Overseer was completely overtaken by the Valg at this point, or I guess honestly dead.
Yeah, it's a bit complex because this person was already so vile and disgusting. It's implied that they were essentially soulless, and Erawan speaks to that. But then you have the added element of whatever Erawan did seems particularly horrific. He literally filled him with wordstone, iron, and just dark power. I would imagine whatever that process entails would basically strip you of all your humanity. And that's why Aelin's magic couldn't find anything to grasp onto. Obviously, I don't really want to experiment with this, but I would be curious to see if this was done to a normal good person, if there would be a shred of soul for Aelin's magic to latch onto, or if it would be a similar situation.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. So as if this wasn't crazy enough already, Aelin is suddenly repelled by something in the Overseer, and she quickly realizes that it was the familiar feeling and the taste of both iron and wordstone. The Valg says, "What are collars and rings compared to a solid heart? A heart of iron and wordstone to replace the coward's heart beating within." I kind of got excited about this. So we know iron is the one element immune to magic, and it basically serves as a balance to someone with strong magic by causing fainting spells or worse when they held on to their power too long. We also know Aelin realizes that word marks worked on the iron doors back in Crown of Midnight when she was in the catacombs, and that was notable since iron is supposed to be immune to magic, and yet the word marks worked on it to unlock the door. So I wonder if this is a new way of creating or modifying Valg-infected beings to be resistant to magic that is different from word-based or Valg-based magic. Also, what does it say about the Valg that they can still use their magic with iron? Also, this did make me wonder if the Overseer is actually truly dead, and he was basically reanimated with the Valg and this wordstone iron heart, and that's why Aelin's magic detected nothing within him.
I think this is the best logical explanation about whatever was done to this Overseer that made him essentially untouchable. But I think there's a lot of different interesting possibilities to explore here.
The Overseer in the Valg reveals he was planted here as a warning to Aelin of who is waiting in Morath. But Aelin proceeds to attack over and over with her fire until, sure enough, the iron in her own blood responds accordingly, and she ends up bombing on the ground. The Overseer's iron heart starts beating so strongly that it punches through his chest, revealing nothing inside, only a mighty ageless darkness, and then 2 flickering golden embers at its core. Not embers, eyes. The eyes of Erawan!
Actual screaming in that chapter. Nope.
So that ends chapter 15. Moving on to chapter 16. It quickly becomes evident Erawan has somehow projected himself through the Overseer's body using the wordstone iron heart thing. And Aelin immediately thinks she'd have to be so careful he did not see the amulet around her neck, sense the presence of the final word key inside. Aelin is under the impression Erawan has 2 keys, but we of course believe he has just one.
Either way, Aelin is right. It would be catastrophic if Erawan even sensed that she had a word key. So good thinking, Aelin.
After Aelin initially tries to burn Erawan, he begins taunting Aelin about the Overseer by stating, "I'm surprised you tried to save him first. Given what he did to you at Endovier, do you find pleasure in deciding who shall be saved and who is beyond it? So easy to become a little burning god." So Erawan is definitely playing some mind games with Aelin by trying to play on her own fear of her power by making her doubt her judgment to try and burn the darkness out of the Overseer. I think by stating "so easy to become a little burning god," it touches on this idea that Aelin has always been in a position to save or destroy with her power, but he's trying to weaponize her fear and make her question if she's really any different than Erawan, for example. We, of course, know that she obviously is, but her inner guilt is something Erawan likes to prey on to get to her.
I had this exact same quote pulled out as well. From the very beginning of this series, and really since childhood, Aelin has always feared her magic and what it could do. How easily it could destroy, how much people feared her because of it. Erawan is honestly brilliant for playing upon this insecurity of Aelin's. I don't know if he just intuitively knows this or he can sense people's insecurities and prey upon them, but either way, it's pretty brilliant of him to bring this up.
I feel like the Valk have always kind of done that because in Wendelin, when she faced Narach, they always seem to be able to pull on somebody's biggest fears or their biggest worries and stuff like that. So
their worst memories. Yeah, I think worst fears. Yeah, maybe it's because they can feed on those memories. They're able to pull out what makes people feel those feelings or, what feelings those memories evoke.
I also think this continues to foreshadow a big decision Aelin will need to make in the future by using her fire in some sort of big self-sacrificial way in order to save the world or something. To move on, Aedion steps in next to taunt Erawan about losing Dorian, but Erawan always seems to be at least one step ahead because he reveals that he knew Rowan and Dorian are together and was currently tracking them. He eerily threatens, "I'm going to hone them into my most loyal generals, starting with your Fae Prince."
On a first read, I was worried that the Val would intercept Dorian and Rowan, but thankfully we got to read far enough to know that they do make it to Skull's Bay safely.
Yes.
So I was happy about that. But the first time I was like, oh my god, I don't want our story to go in that direction.
A battle of magic ensues with Aelin blasting Erawan with her fire, though it couldn't seem to burn the Wordstone in Ironheart, but she tries again, and this time the blue light of her flame finally manages to destroy the Overseer's body, and it says, "The dark shields around it yielding to her, and some small part of her realized that it only did so when Erawan deigned to leave." Big yikes. This is horrifying to know Erawan basically let Aelin win this time. How much power is it really going to take to actually destroy Erawan? We talked about this last episode about Aelin and Dorian combining their powers again like they did at the end of Queen of Shadows, and that definitely feels like it's becoming more and more likely. I also kind of wonder if maybe even more of them, like Rowan and Lorcan or others, will need to also be involved as well.
This interaction is definitely alarming and did not make me feel good. I would imagine since Erawan was only projecting himself into the Overseer's body, that he would be nowhere near his full strength. I am genuinely afraid of what he can do in person with his full power. Hell, he can do all kinds of horrible shit to them without even using his power. Just using Wordstone and, I don't know, whatever experiments and shit. So I'm not feeling good. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not feeling good.
Agreed. So all that remains is the iron and Wordstone lump, and Aelin thinks that was the cost. Erawan's plan to realize that the only mercy she might offer her court would be death. No. I hate this idea, but literally how awful. That would be the worst possible thing, to face someone you love who is now a Valk and be forced to kill them because that's the only way to actually free them.
I mean, is this not exactly what happened with Dorian in Queen of Shadows? Aelin decided she was going to kill Dorian to end his suffering, and it was only because of Manon's message that she gave saving him a chance. Right. I'm not sure she's going to be so lucky next time, especially because it seems likely Dorian only survived being in a Wordstone collar because his magic was able to protect some small piece of him. Mm-hmm. So this threat feels real, and it feels like it has some real potential to be disastrous. So I'm going to need everyone to stay away from Morath and stay away from Erawan.
Run away. Yeah.
Run away.
They agreed that they needed to get to Skulls Bay as quickly as possible now that Erawan was hunting Rowan and Dorian. I have a thought about the hunters Erawan has set after them later in chapter 20, so just hold on to this little detail for now. As the chapter ends, Aelin realizes that Erawan's power has been mere inches from striking the word key. But she realizes that this was a reminder that she might be the heir of fire, but Erawan was the king of darkness. I do wonder if the word key protected Aelin in its own way, and I also wonder why Erawan couldn't feel its pull. Aelin and Rowan can feel the keys. A lead kind of describes being able to feel it, and yet Erawan can't feel it or sense it at all. I don't know. I guess the word works in mysterious ways.
I got nothing. No ideas. Just bad vibes.
So that ends chapter 16. Moving on to chapter 17. We switch to Manon's perspective, who awaited Asterin's execution with a heavy heart. She struggles with what to do, considering to rescue Asterin would be to betray her matron, her clan. Her mistake. It was her own mistake, her own damn choices that had led to this. But another step out of line would also put the rest of the 13 at risk. The only consolation in her mind was that at least she was still a wing leader and could, quote, lead her people, protect them, better than allowing someone like Iskra to take command. Ultimately, Manon is in a really tricky position. She feels so much guilt for Asterin's impending death, but at this moment, she's also weighing the cost to the larger goal for the witches as a whole if she loses her position as wing leader. I think Manon has started thinking not just about her own change, but also the collective change that she wants to see among all the witches. Of course, on her first read, I was like, you better save Asterin, but it's tough.
I felt the exact same. I was like, okay, yes, protecting the rest of the 13 is good, but how about we save Asterin now and worry about the rest of the 13 later? I get it, but someone better save baby Asterin, and they did, so I'm happy.
Ultimately, Manon decides the only mercy that she could offer Asterin was a swift death by Manon using the words of request. As we continue, I had to get myself some tissues when Manon starts reflecting on Asterin's past and she thinks, and maybe Asterin would at last see that hunter of hers, see the stillborn witchling they'd had together. Never again would Asterin ride the wind. Never again would Asterin soar on the back of her sky blue mare. Oh my god. Any reminder of Asterin's love for the hunter or the loss of her witchling immediately just reignites this stab of emotion in a simultaneous rage at Granny B all over again.
Me too. Thinking about her witchling and her hunter messed me up. It also just reminded me of how full of life Asterin has always been. From the very first time we meet her in Airfire, she's just so vibrant. Remember how she got in trouble and Manon broke her nose and the whole time she was just grinning like a fool, and how Manon sometimes wondered if Asterin would ride her wyvern stark naked, which I know is funny, but also something about that just rings really true for Asterin's character. And even though I know she's fine, now I made myself upset.
On a separate note, I found it sweet that Manon brushes Abraxos because it just kind of reminded me of my dogs. If you're a pet owner, you know that feeling of just like petting or hugging your pet in all emotional states. And it made me want to hug Ernie and Kelso.
Aww.
In the Eyrie, Sorrel finds Manon and carefully urges her to help Asterin when she says, I wish I had a chance to see the wastes, just once. She goes to her death to keep your secrets. Shortly after, all the witches gather on a veranda and Asterin is kneeling before the matrons. I was big mad to see that although Asterin was only supposed to receive 12 blows, it was obvious from the cuts and bruises that it had been far more than that. Despite her state and what was coming, I had so much respect for Asterin when she tells Manon, be glad to know, Manon, that she had to chain me up to beat me. Asterin did not deserve any of this, but she's fearless and I love her.
Not only is she fearless, but she's bold as hell. She is literally about to be executed and she's still talking shit to Iskra. And I was looking here for that kind of energy.
I also love that after Iskra's shitty response, Sorrel snarls at Iskra, displaying emotion that Manon was not accustomed to seeing from her. Granny B steps in and announces any witch who wishes to extract blood in the name of Sell to Yellowlegs may come forward. And at this, I was kind of like, what the fuck? They already beat Asterin to a pulp, and now the execution is basically for every other witch to just beat her to death. It's just so messed up to think about it.
I agree. I know the witches are brutal, but damn, how many times are they going to let people just abuse her? Like, you already beat her before, and now everyone gets to get in line to take some blood? I mean, come on.
Before any more of the scummy Yellowlegs could lay another blow on Asterin, Manon jumps in to invoke the right of execution. And then the blue blood matron, Cressida, speaks in favor of Manon and grants her this right. As we've been discussing, the Blue Bloods sense something about Manon or the future of the witches and possibly have always had more heart than the other covens. This is another example of them showing support for what's right and thereby foreshadowing some bigger change is to come among the witches. I also thought it was really symbolic that after this announcement, it says, "And in the east, slipping over the mountains like molten gold, the sun began to rise," because I think it symbolizes hope, a signal of change, and the dispelling of darkness, or, the brutality and the cruelty in the case of the witches.
Oh, I love that description. I wanted to put it in my notes, but I couldn't think of anything really insightful to say about it, but I'm so glad you did, because what you said was so great. Yes.
As Manon gets ready to end Asterin's life, Asterin says, "Bring my body back to the cabin." This one little line just broke open the floodgates of my eyeballs. And it broke Manon's soul as well, because she thinks Manon understood in that moment that there were forces greater than obedience and discipline and brutality. Understood that she had not been born soulless. She had not been born without a heart, for they were both begging her not to swing that blade. That was such a powerful little paragraph. Let the change begin and fuck them other witches. 13 forever!
I love this line. This is one of my favorite quotes of the entire series. I put it in the book report. I posted it on Threads. I read it a bunch of times. It's my favorite quotes. Oh, it's so good. This moment is so gratifying for Manon's character development. SGM has really, with all of the characters, but specifically for Manon, she's woven this beautiful arc that really hits its pinnacle at such an impactful emotional moment. It just takes my breath away. And I feel like I'm really starting to see why people are so fanatic about this series. Don't get me wrong. I've really enjoyed it. I have not quite gotten the, I'm unwell, I'll never be the same. With moments like this, I'm starting to get it.
I really like it so far. I think every book, as we've been talking about, just gets better and better. You see how we've moved from small plot to big plot, and just keeping track of all the changes between everybody's characters has been really cool.
Something I try to remember too is, I have the audiobook, the physical books. I have all the different kinds of copies, but on the Kindle, I have the bundle of all 8 books, and it tells you what percentage you are. Mm-hmm. And I think we're just now at 52% of the entire series. Even though we're reading the 6th book in the series, we still have 50% to go, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So I definitely am prepared for more of these moments, and I'm very excited.
Also, just Asterin forever. She was loyal and fearless to the damn end,
Retweet 1,000 times. Literally any time is a good time to put that note in. I don't care what we're talking about. I don't care what we're doing. You just want to throw in an Asterin forever. I'm fine with it.
Yes. She's gotten the worst of it, too. None of the other 15 ever, get treated as badly. I mean, not that I want any of them to get treated badly, but, Asterin in particular just gets attacked over and over again. I'm leave her alone.
She's like the punching bag for the 13.
Literally. So the 13 as a group, they're becoming one of my favorite group of characters because I just got that shiver of awe when it says each of them lifted 2 fingers to their brows, the gesture not to honor a high witch, but a witch queen. I'll say it again. Manon is going to be queen of the witches. This chapter was just chock full of impactful lines. So here's another one. It was when it said, forgiveness shown in the faces of the 13. Forgiveness and understanding and loyalty that was not blind obedience, but forged in pain and battle, in shared victory and defeat, forged in hope for a better life, a better world.
I just had perpetual goosebumps this entire chapter. We could have just read the chapter in the podcast and that would have mate me happy, honestly.
Asterin is the final one of the 13 to raise her fingers to her brow, and after she says, "Bring our people home," Manon makes a fate-altering decision that made me fist pump wildly in the air. She yells at her 13 to run, and then she brings down Windcleaver on Granny B.
Retweet.
Oh my God.
Literally
Wow.
so happy. Words cannot express the pure fear, joy, exhilaration, all the feelings. I was just like, oh my God.
Amped
wow.
up. Ready
Amped
to go.
up. Yeah. Yes.
All right. So that ends chapter 17. Moving on to chapter 18. Strap in real tight because we got a lot of interesting information. Huge reveal in this chapter. And I was dead on the floor. Oh, when we learned the truth. I'm just floored and yet also just in awe because looking back, again, it just makes so much sense. All the little breadcrumbs and stuff that we've gotten about everything. So
same. I try to think of what other reveals in the series have caught me this off guard. And honestly, I think this might be the most shocking one so far. Of course, Aelin being Aelin Asher over Galathinius was up there. But I also feel like there was a lot of foreshadowing for that. Like if you were really reading, I don't want to say predictable, but it didn't come out of left field for me. Erawan being in Duke Parrington's body and the King of Ireland being inhabited by a Vogue was pretty big and shocking, but this really shook me. I feel like there is foreshadowing and symbolism leading up to this. It's just more artfully integrated. And so as you're experiencing it, you think it means something else. But then when it's revealed, you're like, oh my God. Oh my God. And so this kind of took the cake for me.
So a one-on-one combat ensues between Manon and Granny B. In fact, they do it the ancient way, meaning iron claws only. Manon briefly reflects on how she'd never seen her grandmother fight and wondered if it was because her grandmother did not want others to know how skilled she was. And I was like, 1000%, yeah. She was studying everyone else without ever revealing her own skills. Manon's biggest relief and concern was for her 13, who had thankfully vanished while Granny B begins to taunt her about how pathetic Manon's mother was. Rude. Granny B reveals a quick tidbit of info about the true nature of Manon's mother's death when she says, "Perhaps you'll die like her too, with my teeth at your throat." Red flag. Raise the flag. Granny B killed her own daughter. If she ain't the true witch killer, then I don't know who is. It's her.
Right?
Witch killer.
Yes. Well, that would also mean Granny B is a kinslayer because she killed her own daughter. So
She's
not
a
to
big
mention
old hypocrite.
she's a big old hypocrite. Let's say a bunch of mean stuff about Granny B, okay? Not to mention she lied to Manon. She has always told Manon that she died in childbirth. So you have like the first blow, oh, I killed your mom. Like I hate Granny B. I hate her.
Same.
I hate her so much.
Granny gets a solid swipe at Manon's stomach, and how she survived that, literally no idea. I'm sure you loved reading about this, though, Addison.
Why, though? I'm confused.
Because of her guts and, like, the blood and stuff coming out, and I was just thinking about the slab of meat stuff and all that.
Oh, okay. Because when I read that, I was like, I'm not happy Manon got hurt. I would be happy if Granny B got hurt. Okay, I didn't.
This was sarcasm and a joke about
No, I didn't enjoy it. No, it was okay. I really don't do well. I really don't do well when they start talking about entrails and like if they're like they're holding like their inside. That's when it starts to get a little vomicillin for me, you know?
Okay, yeah.
So this wasn't as bad as the slabs of meat, though. I escaped that, but it still wasn't good for me.
Granny continues with a verbal onslaught, threatening to feed Abraxas to the other wyverns and stripping Manon of her title as wing leader, while adding she is now Manon Witchkiller, Manon Kinslayer. First of all, obligatory fuck Granny B. She never touch Asterin, Abraxas, or Manon ever again. Never. Second, the Kinslayer portion is another piece of quick foreshadowing for the truth we are about to learn. Third, I thought it was very clever when it said the words pelted her like stones, because I just feel like that ties in really well with the historical practice of stoning people as a form of punishment for sins committed, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, Safe to say, I was stressing. Things are not looking good for Manon, who gets pushed to the rail of the balcony, and then Granny B reveals the biggest secret. Since Selena Sardathian wasn't in league with Aelin Ashbury Galathinian, Selena Sardathian was. In case you'd like to take a guess at what my face was doing during this reveal, drum roll, please. King Prawn. That was my
King
face.
Prawn. Yep. If you're new here, you need to look up King Prawn. It lives rent-free in our head. We'll frequently make reference to it. It was a very popular reel a while back. Any context, you'll understand the reaction to this. Doesn't have to be third glass related.
All right, so let's start with what we learn. Manon's father was a rare-born Kraken prince, and so Manon's mixed blood would be the key to breaking the curse. Manon has technically been killing her relatives from her Kraken witch hunting, and Manon's father had never stopped loving her or her mother. Apparently, it is so awful that a parent loved their children. So, Granny B killed Manon's father as well, leaving her free to raise Manon into a child of war and all of her cruel ideals. The Kraken witch that was caught spying on the Iron Teeth and who Manon had been ordered to kill was named Rhiannon, after the last Kraken queen, and she was Manon's half-sister. The Krakens had figured out Manon was their prince's child, and as the last of the royal bloodline, that makes Manon a Kraken queen. OMGY. I haven't said that in a while.
I appreciate that. I miss the OMGY.
As if we didn't have enough reasons to hate Granny B already, this was just beyond crazy and sad. Granny B is a murderer. Straight to jail for this.
Right to jail.
But as far as the info about Manon goes, we were first made aware of a Kraken curse against the Iron Teeth back in Chapter 19 of Crown of Midnight after Dorian, Selena, and Kael meet Baba Yellowlegs the first time at the carnival. To give a quick refresher, it said Dorian had heard the legends of the fallen witch kingdom, where bloodthirsty witches had overthrown the peaceful Kraken dynasty and then ripped apart the kingdom stone by stone. 500 years later, songs were still sung of the deadly wars that had left the Iron Teeth clans, the only ones standing on a killing field. Dead Kraken queens all around them. But the last Kraken queen had cast a spell to ensure that as long as Iron Teeth banners flew, no bit of soil would yield life to them. With the added information that Manon is in fact a Kraken queen, A, this explains all the symbolism of the crowns and stuff we've been talking about the past couple episodes. And B, not only is Manon the key to breaking the curse, I still do believe she is going to unite all the witches and become High Queen of all the witches.
I agree as well. I went back and reread that scene with the Kraken witch Manon killed in Air of Fire, who we now know as Rhiannon. Here are a couple of interesting things that prospectively have changed given the information we have now. Rhiannon says, Manon Blackbeak, I know you. A very simple line, but it hits totally different now that you know that's her half-sister. Rhiannon also says, you want to know our grand Kraken secret? It's not where we hide or how to break your curse. You have known all this time how to break it. You have known for 500 years that your salvation lies in your hands alone. I know we talked about this at the time and we both agreed Manon was definitely the key to breaking the curse. But now we know for sure with the added element of it has to do with her heritage. Yes. Also, something I just want to remark on and add here, I actually didn't think about until I was reading your notes and saw it in quotations. The fact that a male witch was born is interesting. When I first read that, I didn't even process that that would be unique. And so I am curious to find out more about the significance of that. How often does that happen? Is that indicative of something special? Because we know that to our knowledge, all witches are female until this very moment. Right. So I did think that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So crazy.
Crazy.
So last but not least, how freaking awful that Manon killed her own sister without even knowing it. And looking back now, I think Rhiannon's final words about Manon being made to be cruel and bloodthirsty were totally the truth in disguise. That was probably her way of trying to give Manon the truth, because it's not like She could have outright just said that back in Airfire. I mean, that was such a huge catalyst, of course, to put Manon on this course of change for herself and the witches. But still, imagine killing your own sister. What a freaking gut punch. This also totally makes sense for why Granny B has just generally been so awful to Manon, despite her being her granddaughter. She'd always known that Manon was part Kraken and basically just despised her for it this entire time. So the scene ends with Manon rolling off the balcony where Abraxos catches her before Granny B can finish her off. At this point, Manon is barely conscious from her wound as Abraxos speeds off, and she is quickly flanked by the Shadows, Edda and Briar, who definitely heard everything and were sent to retrieve Manon. I do really appreciate this detail, and I just love the 13 and how they always look out for each other. So at this point, 6 yellow-leg witches are hot on their wyverns' tails, and Manon orders each of them to take on 2 each. She tells the Shadows, you kill them, then you find the others. That's an order. SJM just gets me every time with her writing. I loved when Manon tells Abraxos, let's make it a final stand worthy of song. And then it said, like a shooting star, he blasted down toward the peaks of the Ashy Mountains. Our warrior-hearted wyvern.
Abraxos better get a meat buffet after this, as much as he wants, okay? Not just an extra ration, but he better get a damn buffet.
Well, I feel like they're going to have to go hunting. They're going to have to go find a goat field in the Oakwald Forest.
Oh, do you think there are plenty of goat fields in Oakwald Forest, Lorraine?
You never know. There's so much to explore.
Oh my god.
Let this be a reminder that one wyvern's weakness is another wyvern's strength, because speedy little Abraxos full sends into the ravine while the other bulky wyverns of the yellow-leg witches following them struggle to fit. They end up losing one of the wyverns to a stone column, but Manon still has one to get rid of. Fortunately for Manon, the 13 practiced flying through these canyons and knew them very well, so she hatches a plan that gave them one shot to lose the yellow-leg witch for good. I loved, again, when Manon says, to the very end, Abraxos, and then he roars in confirmation. Manon and Abraxos slowly let the Yellowlegs wyvern catch up to them, and just when you think the Yellowlegs is gonna get Manon, nope. Abraxos steers upwards at the last moment, barely making it over, while the Yellowlegs wyvern smacks straight into the wall. And I was like, bye, bitch.
You're out of control this episode.
I feel like nice revenge stories.
Yeah.
They got. The ones who deserve it.
I guess I didn't realize this about you, but alrighty then. Remind me not to get on your bad side.
That's right. I'm a force to be reckoned with.
She said dancing in her chair.
Okay, anyways. I thought Manon's plan was so clever because honestly, I didn't know what her plan was in the canyon. I thought she was just going to try and lose the Yellowlegs or throw a knife at her or something, but the real plan was so much better.
Honestly, this whole scene, I wondered how she was going to get out of it because she is clearly in absolutely no condition to fight, and she's so weak that she couldn't even throw a dagger if she wanted to. So I thought that was very clever of her to use all of her practice with Abraxos to outmaneuver them. Yeah. And Abraxos really is the little wyvern that could, you know?
Yeah. To end this chapter, Manon and Abraxos outsmart the Yellowlegs, but Manon was still bleeding profusely, and she barely gets out Oak before she passes out. And I was like, oh God, I know Manon is going to be okay, as in she's not going to die because it's too early for that. But still, I wonder what's going to happen to her in the 13. It kind of seems like they're meeting up somewhere in the Oakwald, but they're wanted witches now, so where are they going to run?
I'm more worried about how the hell they're going to keep Manon alive. I agree it seems highly unlikely she would die, but she literally seems like she's on the brink of death right now.
True. My final question for this chapter, I kind of wondered why her body hasn't started stitching itself back up. I always just assumed or thought the witches had that self-healing power like the Fae, but maybe they don't.
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe it had started, but you have to remember at the time from when Granny B swiped her, to the end of this chapter, it's probably only minutes. So maybe it had started. We just don't get that description. I'm sure we'll get a pretty quick explanation in Manon's next chapter.
Or I wonder if their claws being iron has something to do with it too. Right?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yes.
The magic. And so maybe it stops them from healing wherever they get
yeah, because they do have iron armor, iron weapons. Yeah.
Right. Iron claws. I don't know.
And fangs. Teeth.
Yeah, true. Yeah. All right. So that ends chapter 18. Moving on to chapter 19. So this time we switch to Aelin and Lorcan, and we check back in with them as they are en route as planned for the Acanthus River. I thought it was very clever and kind of funny that Aelin has just continued pretending to be a silly girl blinded by gratitude that Lorcan saved her. And meanwhile, Lorcan doesn't even think twice about her fake name. I just think it's funny that she tricked a 500-year-old fae.
Now that you say that, it makes me love Aelin even more. I too enjoy that.
Aelin is, of course, full of many questions for Lorcan and had no doubt the warrior was keeping secrets of his own and that despite his promise to protect her, the moment he got every answer he needed, that protection would end. I swear to Mala, if Lorcan abandons Aelin in the end, we're going to have some words. But this was also kind of sad because Aelin has so little faith in men. And it made me think of when she thought she had seen enough of the kindness and mercy of men. At this time, she knows this is simply a transactional exchange of information for protection. But I hope that changes soon.
I mean, it would be sad if Lorcan did that, but I just don't see it happening. I have no idea what circumstances will change that will keep them together, but ain't no way they're separating. I don't see it. Close my eyes.
Upon arriving to the Acanthus River this morning, my heart broke for Aelin when she thinks she could not remember the last time she'd seen sunlight dancing on a meadow or little brown birds bobbing and swooping on the warm breeze over it. Aelin has basically been a prisoner for the last 10 years, and it's so sad to know that most of the nature that she'd ever seen was through a window or for that brief moment while she was escaping with Manon.
Again, the writing here is so good. The scene is so heartbreaking for Aelin's character development. And because we picked up her story in Morath, I kind of forgot that she was a prisoner who was basically locked away in a tower for her entire life. So she really has not seen anything. She's almost seen nothing of the world because she was, I think, 8 when she got snatched up by Vernon. So
she's free now, though.
Well,
for now.
Yeah, for now. And, Erawan's impending doom. But yeah, sort of.
Before heading into town for their plan to find a carnival crew to travel with, they quickly work on their appearances with Lorcan, needing the most work. I thought it was hilarious that Aelin tells him, you at least need to pretend to be human. Because obviously, Lorcan is just this huge, towering, stoic man, fae, who looks literally nothing like a human. So,
as SGM likes to say, Lorcan probably looked like death incarnate.
Yes.
This part also made me wonder if Lorcan has pointed ears and elongated canines. We know that he is a demi-fae, and based on what we learned in Era Fire, demi-fae can have a mixed match of human and fae traits. Not all of them have pointed ears, some have rounded. I'm gonna guess that he doesn't have either because Aelin would definitely want him to hide those. His ears he probably would have been able to hide with his hair, but I don't think he would have been able to hide pointed teeth. So I think Lorcan does have human characteristics. He doesn't have the presence of a human, but he must look characteristically human in that sense.
That's a good point. I hadn't actually thought about that. I think I just assumed probably looked fae, mostly because
I thought so too.
When first saw him, she immediately knew he was fae. But yeah, that is right that, going into a public place like this, those things would also be recognizable, especially if he's
oh,
smiling.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
I guess we don't know if he was smiling with teeth, I guess. Knowing Lorcan,
I feel like he was.
Like a toothless smile. Really? I was going to say, I feel like he was probably giving closed mouth smiles because it's Lorcan, but
I don't know. This is a headcanon for me. I just picture him with a really overly wide grin and big eyes because he's bad at smiling. He doesn't know how to do it. So he's just
right.
This really non-genuine attempt at smiling.
So Lorcan is made to tie back his hair and unbutton his jacket while Aelin takes off her jacket to hopefully distract men just enough that they won't ask questions. And then she fashions her hair into a married woman's top knot. This is just the beginning of Leid's cleverness in this chapter, but it's simultaneously upsetting to think that even though the last thing she wants to have to use her body for is this plan, she also knows it's exactly what will keep men and soldiers distracted enough to not catch on to what she's actually doing.
I know that not all the men are like this, but it's so demoralizing to read that Aelin knows enough of them are like that to use it to her advantage.
She thinks men would see what they wanted to. A pretty young woman who did not bristle at their attention, who spoke kindly and warmly, someone trustworthy, someone sweet yet unremarkable. Once they get closer to the toll bridge for the river, they take note of the Otterlonian soldiers stationed there, checking every wagon and the face of people passing through. Realizing that her limp would be a dead giveaway, I love that Aelin asks Lorcan to help her limp less notable, and then he does help. I was like, oh, nice, Lorcan. It says, a force of cool night wind pushed against her ankle and calf, and then wrapped around it in a solid grip. Her steps even for now, they decide to head to the tavern to wait out the line. Lorcan manages to relax his face into a bland smile as they enter the tavern.
Oh, this is where I had my note about his smile. This part was actually really funny to me because, as I said earlier, I just picture him with like this really idiotic smile. And then just knowing how he looks physically and his personality, those two things in juxtaposition with a lead there also, the whole scene is just, it's top-notch comedy.
Yes.
I don't know if it's intended to be, but I think it is.
So as luck would have it, Anna continues to watch over Leid because a table opens up right next to a boisterous carnival group.
Okay, guys, it's time for another one of Addison's weird pet peeves that I forgot about until I read this. Now, it isn't as bad as the chunks of meat. Y'all know I really am not okay with that. But I hate when people use this description. A barrel-chested bearded man whose hands were as large as dinner plates. If fucking excuse me, but what the actual fuck? That's insane and freakish. See, I can't even say it.
It's pretty.
That's insane. Freaky, yeah. No one's hands are that big. Can't you just say you had beefy hands or big old hands? And this is a description I have read in other books before, okay? This is not a novel thing to SJM. And I know that because it's one of my pet peeves. I've read it enough times to know I don't fucking like it. I hate that shit.
This is so, like, oddly specific.
I think about, like, my dinner plates, and if someone's hands were that large, I think it would freak me the fuck out. I feel like I picture them having, like, Mickey Mouse hands, you know, like, super giant in proportion to their body, and it's weird, and I hate it.
I guess I always think of it as, like, the span. Because, like, my pinky to my thumb would be, like, a small plate, like, the width of it.
Yeah, it's fair. Don't justify it. Just say you hate it, too.
Okay. Yeah, freaking sucks. That's an awful decision.
Thank you for your support. I appreciate that.
Anyways, Aelin and Lorcan quickly established themselves as a married couple, and I found it notable that when Aelin says, men will not fear the threat of a brother, I would still be unclaimed, still be open for invitations, so you are my husband. Lorcan actually seems concerned because he grips her hand tighter to try and get an answer from her. And as like Lurkin's cold stoic heart is slowly melting just a little bit for Aelin, methinks.
There is something so funny about tiny little Lead and giant dinner plate hands Lorcan being together and how he was like, no, I'm your brother. And she just says, you are my husband until I say otherwise. And Lorcan's just like, oh, shit, okay, I don't really know how to say no to this. You know, like, I also have this sense that Aelin is never going to let Lorcan stop being her husband. They're going to be married in perpetuity. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. But
yes,
I have a feeling Lorcan will never quit playing this role.
I'm a fan of that. I like this plan.
It's brilliant, really. So, ladies, this is a way to find you a husband, okay? Just tell him he's your husband until you say otherwise. Yeah. What are they going to do? Say no? Not an option. Tell him to go take a nap instead.
Is this what you did with your husband?
Yeah, well, I mean, not this exactly. I was very clear. I would literally hold my hand up and point to my ring finger and be like, I want to be your wife. And I did that a lot. I also developed floating finger syndrome where my hand was too light. So it would like float in front of his face when he was trying to watch TV or drive. And I'd be like, oh my God, I need something to weigh it down. Perhaps a diamond ring. That might help. I don't know. So it worked.
There you go.
Tried and true, ladies. Give it a shot. Okay, so
they overhear the table next to them discuss performance logistics and toll fees, so a lead channels Asterin Blackbeak for some charm and confidence to step in and ask to join their group with the offer of helping pay the toll. Aelin is such a smart cookie, and I loved seeing that she'd guessed right about what performers the group needed by offering Lorcan was a sword thrower, while Aelin is a fortune teller. When questioned about what carnival they were in before, we get a quick callback to good old Baba Yellowlegs when Aelin lies about being in her Carnival of Mirrors. Baba!
Baba! I really missed that. In case you're new here, at the time I decided I was going to start calling Lorraine Baba Yellowlegs. I thought it was funny. So now my children now call her Baba, actually, which is kind of cute. We dropped the Yellowlegs part. So they know, they'll be like, are you recording with Baba tonight? Or if I'm editing, they see me on my laptop and they're like, are you editing with Baba? And I'm like, yep, sure am. They love Baba.
I didn't like it at first, but it's cute that your kids say it. So now I'm like, okay,
yes,
I will be Baba for that. Yeah.
It's grown on me, yes. I've dropped the yellow leg parts in my mind. First it's meant to be funny, but now I just do think it's sweet. I'm like, oh, Baba. I don't know why. I just like it.
The carnival group leaves, but you bet Money Eyes Molly took note of Aelin and Lorcan paying for their food with a shiny silver coin and leaving a hefty tip as well. I thought it was hilarious.
Money Eyes Molly. Money Eyes Molly. I can't breathe. I know.
Ooh, she was going to go for the money and...
Money Eyes Molly. Man, you are unhinged with this episode. I love this. Oh, Money Eyes Molly. Yep, I'm going to call her that for the rest of the series.
It fits. We may never see her again, but...
Well, I think we will.
Another set of chapters.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, until Lorcan and Aelin separate from the carnival. Absolutely.
True. Anyways.
Oh, Money Eyes Molly.
I thought it was hilarious, though, that Lorcan was like, you have no money, do you? Because, again, he got by a 19-year-old.
Love it.
So, fortunately, their plan does work because Money Eyes comes back to make them an offer outside, just as they had anticipated. Molly offers them a temporary stint with no reimbursement for the toll, though. We changed to Lorcan's POV, and it was hilarious to see that Lorcan is floored with Lee's competence in trickery. He thinks his wife, gods above, he was over 500 years old, and this girl, young woman, she-devil, whatever she was, had just bluffed and lied her way into a job.
I know we've said this 1,000 times already, but I think Lorcan has met his match. Little Aelin she-devil Lorcan.
Yep. We can definitely see a shift in the way that Lorcan thinks about Aelin. He certainly has already taken note of Aelin's beauty, but he's also started to think more deeply about Aelin's cleverness and her experience as not just a prisoner in Morath, but a slave. He thinks he tried not to think about that ting of fear and pain he'd sensed when she told him how little she believed in the kindness and decency of men. He didn't let his imagination delve too deep regarding why she might feel that way. I think this foreshadows the idea that, while the word keys are still Lorcan's number one priority, the transactional deal between them will shift into Lorcan protecting Aelin because he actually cares for her, rather than just because of this deal that they made.
I won't go as far to say that he truly cares for her yet, but I do think you're absolutely right that all of these thoughts are strongly indicative that we're headed in that direction. He's starting to allow himself to see Aelin as a person. And I think based on what we know about Lorcan, I think he's spent a lot of his existence building this wall up where he doesn't really allow himself to see people as people, but as obstacles or allies or enemies. And he just kind of puts them into these categories. So he doesn't really have to get to know them. But of course, with Aelin, he can't do that. And I think that is going to be very impactful for Lorcan.
I think his internal thoughts are also reflective of Lorcan's inner humanity, despite his cold exterior. It made me think of Rowan and Lorcan's conversation back in chapter 65 of Queen of Shadows, when Rowan tricks Lorcan with the fake word key. And he asks him, what happened to you, Lorcan? What happened in your miserable existence to make you this way? He never asked for the full story, had never cared to. It hadn't bothered him until now. Before, he would have stood beside Lorcan and taunted the poor fool who dared defy their queen. You're a better male than this.
I bet you that Aelin will get Lorcan to tell her his full backstory. I
Ooh,
guarantee she'll break down his walls and he'll tell her, he'll confess. I mean, I really want to know what it is. I feel like Lorcan
Same.
has an interesting past. Yeah, and I want to know more.
Yeah, I definitely feel that Lorcan likely has a pretty tragic backstory that contributes to his exterior persona. And yet, he also does make decisions that he thinks are best for the world at large. Hence, his entire mission to try and destroy the word keys rather than let Maeve get them. So perhaps love for Aelin will thaw his hardened attitude, just as it has for Rowan and Manon as well. Once in the carriage with the carnival troupe, Aelin and Lorcan converse with the other members, and they start discussing the hardships of life, comparing their fake, a life beyond the fangs, and a life on the road. I found it poignant when Marion/Aelin tells Nick, one of the carnival members, a life of open skies and roads, of wandering where the wind takes you, answering to no one and nothing, a life of freedom. What more could I ask than to live a life unchecked by cages? And I was like, oh, Aelin, she deserves some much needed good luck and freedom after everything she's been through. And despite being on the run, essentially, this is still better in Aelin's eyes because she is finally free for the first time in a very long time. I also like that hearing this from Marion/Aelin only strengthens Lorcan's resolve to make sure that the word keys don't end up in the wrong hands because, he's kind of factoring Aelin as well now and he doesn't want her to lose her freedom again, which I thought was very nice of Lorcan. The conversation shifts to Nick's reveal, the witch attack on Rifthold, which surprises both Lorcan and Aelin. And Nick says, no word on the young king, but the city belongs to the witches and their beasts. They say to travel north is to now face a death trap. To travel south is another death trap. We'll head east. Maybe we can find a way to bypass whatever's waiting in either direction. Maybe war will come and we'll all scatter to the winds. This aligns with what we learned from Erawan about his plans to cut Terrasen off and create a blockade through the middle of the continent. But it's interesting to see how average people think about the situation. It definitely feels like regular people are getting nervous and kind of weary that a big war is coming. And honestly, they are aware that regular humans are really not much against witches and wyverns and whatever other beasts they've seen from Erawan. Nick also goes on to provide information on what he'd heard about Aelin Galathinius, and he says, rumor claims her court is strong. A shapeshifter guards her back, and 2 warrior princes flank her on either side. Will she save or damn us all? I don't know if I much like the thought of everything resting in her hands, but if she wins, perhaps the land will get better. Life will get better. And if she fails, perhaps we all deserve to be damned anyway. As a common and regular person in the story, Nick's response really doesn't seem to strongly indicate loyalty to either cause at this point, though he is aware that this impending war could be extremely destructive given who each side has. At this point, regular people have seen that this is no longer just people fighting people. This is a war that involves magic wielders, and the scale of consequence is a lot bigger. His comment also sets Aelin up as kind of this mythic and prophetic figure, which we know she kind of is, and his response about wondering if Aelin will save or damn them suggests people are still hesitant about her, and whether they decide to trust her cause really depends on what she does next. I mean, quite literally, it seems like the fate of this world rests in Aelin's hands and the decisions that she makes, regardless of whether they think she should lead the cause, because she is one of the only ones capable of standing against Parrington/Erawan and his forces.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered the angle that Nick is a representative of the population at large. You're right, though. At this time, it honestly just seems like the common folk don't really care. They may have a slight preference, but I think ultimately they just want to be able to live their life and be left alone,
Yeah.
And so At this time, based on the information that's available to them, which is not much given Nick's perspective, they really will just kind of pick whoever's going to keep life stable for them or make it better. And at this time, I can see them thinking, well, the new king of Aelin, he's been in charge for a while, so maybe we should go that direction. Who is this Aelin Galathinius? She has untold firepower. She's 19. She's a little bit of a wild card, so I can see why there's hesitation for support from her from I'll call them common folk.
Despite Nick's hesitation, though, I love that Elite maintains her loyalty and faith in Aelin's cause and says she will win. I think Elite represents faith in a larger ideal, and we know she has faith in Aelin because Aelin represents hope for a better world and change. And hope, of course, has been a signature part of Elite's character journey, and I love that about her.
The same sentiment is echoed at the end of Lorcan's POV when he realizes she's an optimist and has hope for a better world. Turns out Lorcan is the exact opposite. He's a tried and true pessimist.
Eventually, their wagon makes it to the front for inspections, and the dark-haired beauty and Money Eyes Molly collect the toll fee from Lorcan and warn to avoid looking at the soldier or talking back. Though the soldiers freely steal from the wagon, they pass the inspection and continue across the bridge successfully. Lorcan takes note of Elite's anger at what the soldiers had done and realizes that Elite and Nick were idealists who believed that this world could be better. But Lorcan still believed this was a fool's hope. We end the chapter on an ominous note when Lorcan thinks there was no such thing as a better world, no such thing as a happy end. Because there were no endings, and there would be nothing awaiting for them in this war. Nothing waiting for an escaped slave girl, but a shallow grave. Damn. Way to put a damper on things, Lorcan. But I think Lorcan, knows that wherever this war is headed, it will involve a lot of destruction. I would imagine Lorcan believes war is war, and that even after this one, there will be war again, because that's kind of the nature of things, and I'm assuming he's seen it happen time and time again. I choose to believe like a lead does, but I also kind of, get where Lorcan is coming from to some extent.
Lorcan really took the wind out of my sails. Any hope I had, gone immediately. I was like, well, that was really not uplifting, so thanks for that, Lorcan.
So that ends chapter 19. Moving on to chapter 20, our final chapter. We are brought to a very rundown Skulls Bay where Rowan and Dorian have just arrived. Rowan is exhausted at this point and nearing burnout, but I also took note of his description of the Dead Islands when they'd passed by on their way to Skulls Bay. It said he'd seen no enemies, just turquoise ocean and white sands flecked with dark volcanic stone. We learned back in Air and Fire that General Narok and his forces were stationed there, and Murtaugh had warned Adien, Kale, and Ren that Captain Rolfe had said there have always been legends of strange creatures in the seas, and he'd warned of that pale man wearing a black collar like a pet. It took a step toward them as if to go into the sea and hunt them down, but it was yanked back by some invisible hand, some hidden leash. And then last, Murtaugh stated Rolfe believed monsters were being made in the Dead Islands. It's definitely clear that there are more creatures in Valk to come out of the Dead Islands, and now I wonder if there are some sort of sea-based monsters Erawan has created there. More specifically, I wonder if Erawan's comment in chapter 16 about his hunters tracking Rowan and Dorian was a reference to whatever sea-based creatures he made.
Oh, see, I thought it was the Ilken because they have wings that could fly. But I could see either because there's a good chance he knows they're headed there or suspects. And I mean, if they're on the ocean, obviously an ocean creature is going to be beneficial in tracking that. So, ooh.
Creepy either way.
Yikes.
But actually, speaking of volcanoes, so do you think that the word key Erawan still has could be stashed in the Dead Islands? I keep thinking about the riddle back in Calm that said the second one was hidden in a mountain made of fire where all men were forbidden despite their great desires. Presumably Erawan had 2 keys and he lost one, the one that he'd put in Keltane. And so then I was like, maybe the key that he had with him in Morath was what he used to put in Keltane. And then the second one, which is now his only one, he'd stashed somewhere else. And then I was like, oh, maybe it's in the Dead Islands. And that's how he's continued to be able to create all these creatures and stuff like that, you know?
My initial gut instinct is no. But then I asked myself, if he had 2 word keys with him, why did he not put the other one in Kelting? Seems like that would be good safekeeping. So I have that thought bouncing around in my head. But then again, I feel like if he actually had the key in his possession, that's extremely valuable, and he would keep that close to him as possible. For anyone to try and take a key from Erawan would be suicide because he's so powerful, and he really can't afford to lose a word key. I think he put one in Keltain thinking that there was no way anyone could get to her, or he never anticipated her still maintaining some agency, and that's why he lost the key in Keltain. And now that he knows he's lost that one, I would think what remaining key he had, he would keep as close to him as humanly possible. So it's possible. It's not a bad idea. But my gut instinct just says no, he would keep it with him.
That's fair. I guess I just think about how, they were creating things in Morath, but they're also creating things in the Dead Islands, it seems like. And so
True.
That seems like something that was stemming from the power of the word keys. And so then I was like, oh, well, maybe he did just, split them up, and I don't know. Anyways, Rowan and Dorian debated about how to get their meeting with Captain Rolfe. Notably, Rolfe's headquarters and ship are named the Sea Dragon, and we also see that the barmaid has twin tattoos of gray sea dragons on her arms. We just learned back in Chapter 11 about the Mycenians and their sea dragons, and I think it's very interesting that Rolfe and his crew use sea dragons as a symbol for his crew. I wondered if this means there's some sort of connection between Rolfe and the Mycenians and sea dragons. Maybe he just knows about and reveres them or something, but obviously one thing I've learned from our deep diving experience is that these details are never for nothing. So I think this is foreshadowing something about Rolfe and a connection to the Mycenians some way, somehow.
I had the exact same thought. As soon as I read the word sea dragon, I was like, oh, that's not a coincidence. Rolfe definitely has a connection. Either he is a Mycenian or related to them, or he knows where they are. But absolutely, there is a connection. And it could be as simple as what you said. Maybe he just really reveres them as, seamen. And he's like, oh, they're the best, whatever. They were OG pirates and I want to be like them, whatever. Either way, they're a connection.
Connected, yes.
I think it's more than that, but,
Same, I think so too. It's a very specific thing to be using. And just the layout of how we've gotten the information and then, the sea dragons, I was like, okay, yeah, that, we're going to flag that for sure.
I can actually see Sam dropping the breadcrumbs in the book.
Yes.
She's like, go here, and then go here, and go here.
Yep. I also like the detail about how Rowan started some training with Dorian for his magic. And it's mostly just been exercises of summoning balls of ice, but I still think that's a good sign. Through Rowan's thought, we also get a callback to Aelin's shenanigans, taking us all the way back to our very first story in The Assassin's Blade. Rowan recalls the infamous shipbreaker chain and all the havoc Aelin had wreaked. Since Aelin had destroyed the chain last time she'd been to Skulls Bay, Rolfe had since rebuilt it and also constructed a sister tower across the bay.
I loved when Rowan thought Rowan wasn't surprised, but to see the scope of the hell she had unleashed, holy gods. Rowan has no idea. It's especially crazy to think about because she was 16 when she did all that, and that was just plain old assassin and Selena. That wasn't even fire-breathing bitch queen Aelin, okay? And look what absolute chaos she brought upon Skulls Bay. Because even Rowan's like, God damn. And we're talking about a Fae male who has literally brought down kingdoms. And he's like, God damn, I don't know why, but that's really funny to me.
Gods above.
Gods above. This is going to be our new thing.
Ultimately, Rowan decided Dorian's arrival would be much more diplomatic, and they would properly request a meeting with Rolfe, so they head to an inn called the Ocean Rose to secure some rooms. Interestingly, when they get there, Rowan notes some scents prickled, a shift in the air, like a great pocket of power gathered close, beckoning. Dorian also detects the power, and he says it feels old, feral, ruthless, and when Rowan asks if it feels like the Valg, Dorian responds, no, they were abhorrent to my magic. This thing out there, it just makes my magic curious. Wary, but curious, but it's concealed somehow. So I was very interested by this. And these are some of my thoughts as to what they're detecting. First, I thought maybe they sense Rolfe nearby. I would imagine Rolfe having that magical map on his hand marks him with some detectable magic some way, and I'm sure whatever magic was used to give Rolfe the map is ancient. My next thought, perhaps it's something related to Maeve's forces, although I don't think that they would have gotten to the continent already, since Aelin's crew was just informed about Maeve's forces gathering. But we also don't know how old the ship captain's information was, since it likely takes several days for news to get around. I also wondered if maybe it was the witches, but I think Rowan and Dorian would both recognize that kind of magic from them, since they'd encountered them before. Whatever it is, there is something magical close by, for sure. And last but not least, I did wonder how whatever it is that they're sensing is concealed. How is that possible?
Yeah, I wondered about that as well. I don't know how you can make the presence of magic felt and then eliminate it short of actual distance, putting distance between the two sources of magic. Whatever it is, I think it's at least safe to say it's not a threat. We know it's not a Vogue, and if it were another kind of enemy or someone who meant to do them harm, I think their magic would sense it. My mind immediately was like, oh, it's Lorcan or maybe Manon because they're both powerful and aren't enemies. But of course, we know that it can't be. So whatever it is, I don't anticipate it being a threat. I think their magic would sense that.
We change to Dorian's perspective, who marvels at how a pirate lord rose to power thanks to his magical map tattoo. A map rumor claimed that had revealed where enemies, treasures, and storms awaited him. The cost, his eternal soul. So this also stuck out to me, and it definitely seems to imply there was some sort of cost for Rolfe to get the map. Eternal soul makes me think he's perhaps lost his place in the afterlife or something like that when he dies. I also wondered if maybe Rolfe was originally an immortal being, so then maybe the cost was his immortality. But then again, Rolfe does seem surprisingly young when they meet him. So,
I wondered about this. This kind of sounds like a myth or legend that Rolfe has perpetuated over the years. I actually wonder if the map is actually a gift from the Mycenaeans, or he has the map because he is Mycenaean. And for whatever reason, he wants to keep that a secret. And so instead, he's like, oh, I had to trade my soul, as a way to cover it up, right? Kind of keeping it masked in mystery. So that was where my brain went.
Ooh, that would be really interesting. I also thought it was notable that Dorian wonders if Rolfe's map marked them as enemies because, while I do think Rolfe probably senses them arriving now that magic is free again, we still aren't really quite sure what Rolfe is going to do. I also thought it was a good sign that Dorian is gaining more control over his magic when he thinks his magic remained dormant, rumbling when he'd stiffen at a loud noise from within the taverns, inns, homes, and shops they passed. It's also pretty stormy, and it feels ominous in Skulls Bay. So the fact that Dorian's magic isn't reacting, I think reflects that Dorian has more control even from just the short time of practicing with Rowan and stuff. They cautiously enter into the Sea Dragon Tavern on high alert for the magic they'd felt or Rolfe, but they find neither inside. Instead, the tavern is completely empty, but the barmaid inside informs them he was wondering when you two would come snooping, and then directs them to Rolfe's office upstairs. In addition to the twin sea dragon tattoos, which have gray-colored scales that match her eye color, I also found it interesting that Dorian knows the barmaid has an accent like Adian's. And I was wondering, does that mean the barmaid is perhaps from Terrasen originally, and more specifically Ilium, where the Mycenaeans originated, indicating that she is perhaps also connected to the Mycenaeans. I also think the general emptiness of the town and the tavern suggests something is off for sure about Skulls Bay.
I think it likely has to do with the presence of the Vogue there. We know Narok was there before he went to Wendelin, so it wouldn't surprise me if that cleared a lot of people out of Skulls Bay.
Dorian and Rowan uneasily make their way upstairs to Rolfe's office door, which is guarded by 4 young men whose swords also have sea dragon symbols on them. We end on another fun cliffhanger when Dorian is surprised to see that Captain Rolfe is but a day past 30, if that, lounging on a red velvet chase before the rain-splattered curve of windows. I think back in Tab, I was imagining Rolfe kind of as Captain Jack Sparrow, but since then, I have revised the image of him in my mind to be much hotter.
Thank you for your service, Lorraine. I salute you. Honestly, I think I said this earlier. I did actually genuinely write this. I just assume everyone in the series is hot, except for like Granny B. Low-key, Erawan's probably hot. Damn, even those Stygian spiders sounded beautiful. They sounded scary as hell, but they still sounded pretty good looking. You know,
true,
like,
yeah.
I mean, name me an ugly character in this series other than Granny B. I can't think of one.
Find one. Yeah.
Everybody's beautiful.
All right, so that officially ends our analysis, and now we just have our favorite moments to wrap up the episode.
My first favorite moment is a shared one between Lorraine and I. It is when Dorian and Rowan are talking. Dorian says, "I've never met a pirate." And Rowan responds, "You've met Aelin when she was still pretending to be Selena. I can promise you Rolfe won't be much worse." And Dorian responds, "That's not reassuring." That was so funny to me.
My first favorite quote was also in the conversation between Rowan and Dorian. And it was when Rowan says, "I've known many kings in my life, Dorian Haviliard. And it was a rare man indeed who asked for help when you needed it, who would put aside pride."
Oh, I also from that conversation, when Rowan tells Dorian, "You will find your way to Dorian. You'll find your way out."
Oh,
I know.
Big brother Rowan. My next favorite one was during the conversation between Aelin and Lysandra. It's when Lysandra says, "Careful, Aelin, I bite." And then Aelin responds, "Good thing I know how to make women purr."
I love Aelin. When Brannon appears to Aelin and he says, "I cannot stay long," and Aelin responds, "But you're going to manage to cram in as many cryptic warnings as you can, right?" Y'all know how I feel about that.
My next favorite one was it's when they take back the temple, and there was the description that said, "The flame around Aelin's head burned brighter, a beacon in the dark. Symbols have power indeed."
Ooh, yes. You know I love
Crown
a
of
crown of
Flames.
flames. A crown of flames. Ooh, that would be a really good name for a fantasy book.
The next
A crown of
thorns
flames.
A court of flames and crowns. A
I'm gonna write
crown
that
of
down.
flames.
Ooh, I'll write it and call it the Crown series. Ooh,
Ooh.
okay, excellent. Pioneered that in real time. Excellent writing where it says, "A reminder that she might be the heir of fire, but Erawan was the king of darkness."
Ooh, scary. The next one I liked was short and simple, but I thought it had a lot of symbolism to it. And it was when Aelin thinks fire could destroy, but also cleanse.
Ooh, yes, I do love the symbolism of that. That was really good. I like that. Similarly impactful when Manon says, "Turn her around. My second shall see the dawn one last time."
Oh, there were so many good ones from the witch chapters. My last three are from that. My next one was when it said, "Forgiveness shown in the faces of a 13, forgiveness and understanding and loyalty that was not blind obedience, but forged in pain and battle, in shared victory and defeat, forged in hope for a better life, a better world."
And you guys can probably guess my next one. I've said it like 6 times this episode. Don't care. Gonna say it again. Manon understood in that moment that there were forces greater than obedience and discipline and brutality. Understood that she had not been born soulless. She had not been born without a heart. For there were both begging her not to swing that blade.
Oh,
It makes me want to tear up every time.
so good.
So good.
My next one was short and sweet, and it's when Asterin tells Manon, "Bring our people home."
Oh, okay.
will.
My last one is a bit more lighthearted, and it's when Aelin tells Lorcan, "So you are my husband until I say otherwise." Love that one.
Oh, you should have gone last with that because that was more lighthearted. Mine's still serious.
Oh,
So
dang
my
it.
final one was when Manon tells Braxos, "To the very end of Braxos."
Oh, I should have went last. Damn it, Lorraine.
But anyways, that wraps up our favorite moments. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us, so please leave us a review and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok to keep up with us on a daily basis. Well, that's all we've got for you guys today,
So live a little.
and we'll catch you all next week. Bye!
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers. Damn, Lorcan.
God's above, his wife.
God's above. I like that. God's above. I'm going to start incorporating that into my daily life. God's above. Look at this target.
Of course, on our first read, I was like, no, you better save Asterin. You better save Asterin. But it's tough.
Asterin. Of course, Selena being Aelin Alathinius. Aelin Galathinius Azure. I can't say her name. Oh my gosh. Let me back up.
Granny gets a solid wipe.
Whoops. There is something so funny about tiny little Lead and her giant dinner plate hands, Lorcan. I have to say that again. Okay, I forgot that I said that. I loved when Rowan wasn't surprised, but see the scope of the. Wow, what was happening here? I like that is chock full of unreadable things. Okay, wow. Woo. Gods above.